Today's episode is brought to you by EliteFTS.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. We live? What's up, guys? We are back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Zach Even-Esh. We're going to have a lot to discuss, but first, I want to take a moment to thank one of our new sponsors, which is First Detachment, a nutrition and supplement line. This line is founded by Justin Harris and his partner, which is in the description. I don't have the script ready. You know, that's going to launch next week when Justin comes on the show. But what I wanted to do was just to thank them for their sponsorship first. And second, come out and say that I've known Justin for a very long time, well over a decade. And when it comes to supplementation and nutritional support, he is one of the very few people that I would trust in an industry that makes me want to vomit most of the time. If you guys have listened to the podcast and followed me at all over the past 25 years I've been online, you know exactly how I feel about that industry. There's very, very few people that I would trust, and Justin is one. So I want to actually congratulate him on, founding the company. Thank him for supporting the podcast. We'll have him next week. We'll talk about some of the formulations he has. In the meantime, if you go to the link in the description, click on First Detachment, go to their website. Anything that you pick up, they have intra-workout, they have pre-workout, immunity formula, and I'm losing my mind on some of the other ones. And what was that? Okay, that was weird. Anyhow, discount code Table Talk, save you 10%. Okay, so now we're back with Zach. I've known Zach for over probably 20 years. I think in 2002, he came on the website with our old Q&A.
Yes. It was a little later than that. Later. I had written articles before I got on the Q&A team.
Because I remember talking to you, and this is interesting, right? Because you were still teaching at the time.
Yes.
And you were trying to, you wanted to do the training gig, and you were working with kids in the park down the street. You just had some shit in your garage, kettlebells or rocks. You were lifting rocks,
I'm going to see if you remember this story.
Yeah, it was rocks and all this other kind of stuff. So you were training kids in a park, and it was a hard decision for you because it's a big jump, man. You're going from a secure position into.
I didn't leave right away.
Yeah, it was a transition. But the interesting part is when I look through your timeline, we're going to go back even further on the podcast to your earlier times in the gym and the gyms in Jersey and stuff like that. You started in the high school, then you went, into your own private gym, parks and stuff like that.
The house.
Then online, the house. Then it was online. Then it was your facility, which you still have.
Yes.
Then I think 2 facilities at one point in time.
At one point, I had 4. Kind of like one was like a I called it like a satellite facility. It was inside of a baseball club. Yeah.
So you've seen all aspects of the industry.
Yeah.
And now you're back at high school. Right, but in different role, right?
Yes.
Not as a teacher, but as the strength coach of the high
Correct.
school. So you want to talk about going full circle,
Yeah, but staying coaching.
Staying coaching is cool.
Do you remember how, so I was writing articles for Elite FTS for a while. And at one point you said to me, I think it was on the phone, you said, the only person who has more articles than you is myself and Jim. That's what you said to me. And do you remember how I got my Elite FTS squat rack at my first warehouse location?
I think we worked the gig out where you did exercise index posts.
Yeah, but do you know why it happened?
No.
All right, so this is you called me one day.
Yeah.
I didn't have a warehouse gym. I was training out of my first house. So it started out of my parents' house. Then we bought a house and started setting up equipment in there. I trained out of my first house from like '03 till the spring of '07. So 4 years coaching and also teaching at the elementary school. So you call me and you say, Zach, somebody ordered a 2x2 EFS combo rack and they have to ship it back. The guy who ordered it had like a health problem. I think he had a stroke, and he contacted you while it was en route to his house. So you guys had to reroute it, and you said, I don't have room in the warehouse for this. I'm like, I don't have room in a 2-car garage. You said, I don't give a shit. Every time I talk to you, all you're talking about is training athletes, running a gym. And you said, I guarantee you're going to have a gym in 6 months. And 6 weeks later, I was opening the warehouse gym, and it arrived while we were setting up the gym. And it was basically an old 2-car auto garage, but it was crazy because you said 6 months, and I think 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I signed a lease. And then within a few weeks, I had that rack, and it was the 2x2 rack with the dip bar attachment, the box squat, the box.
It's like a sick of your gym package or whatever we had at the time. I remember that.
It's the original West Side rack.
Yeah, whole spacing, yeah. And you may know this, but there are also side conversations going on between me and Alan. Zach needs to do this, right? Because there was a few of you that were just kind of like on the fence.
Yeah.
And the only way, it's a weird place, right? For anybody that's venturing into entrepreneurship,
especially back then,
it's a scary place, and sometimes people need a kick in the ass or some way to kind of force them a little bit. So he was kind of working a little bit on his end there, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of force him to get this thing, which is then he's not going to have room.
You said store it in my dad's garage. You're like, I don't care, put it in your dad's garage. And I was like, I could do that, but that did push me. I was like, I have to go look at this. It was a garage, but here's what's so funny about that garage. I had seen that garage because it was part of a gym I used to train out of. And so this gym, Apollon Gym, and they have Elite FTS equipment in there. It was in like an era where hardcore was kind of like not cool. And so now gyms were becoming like kind of fitness.
Yeah.
So a gym up the street had like fitness classes, spin classes. They were known as, Apollon was known as hardcore. So they're like, oh no, we need to compete with that. So they rented the garage right next to them and turned it into like a kickbox, body pump, all this shit. That fell through. Why does it fall through? Because that's not who you are. So they converted it into like an illegal gambling room. So when I looked at it, I go in and there's poker tables everywhere. The door is tinted out, but it looked massive compared to my 2-car garage. The ceilings were high. I'm like, oh my God, we're going to be able to press overhead.
Yeah.
And I'm staring at it. And he tells me what the price of the rent is. And I think it was going to be like $1,500 a month. He's like, but the first 2 months, I'll go $1,250 for you. And so I go home and I'm like, all right, I need to double my income. I need to, whatever the rent is, $1,500, I need to make $3,000 a month from the garage. So I immediately like kicked in like a referral or reward system, sign up for a year paid in full and I'll give you a month free and it'll be this discount. So like immediately I took action. And I was like, now I have the money. So you're right. Like your back, if your back's never against the wall, you're not ready, like willing to fight. And then so what happened was I'd work at the school and the gym was like a 1.5 miles, 2 miles away. I'd go there, I'd eat, I would train, and then I would train athletes from 5 to 8. But I had my Elite FTS rack, my Prowler, all that stuff.
And you were, the thing that I saw in you back then was the work ethic was through the roof, but your passion for this industry is huge. And just talking to you over the last couple hours, it's still there now, right?
I still love it.
Where you were just digesting everything, even more than everything. You were going back, like way back. And I remember us talking, you would quote certain things. I'm like, I kind of remember that when I was in junior high, right? And you're like, how's he finding this shit? And you were finding everything.
Yes.
and just absorbing all of it. And then even the newer stuff and all that, and putting it all online as well. So writing for us, then you had your own site, then you had the paywall site, whatever
Yes.
that was.
Still have it.
Still have that, right? I mean, just, you still have, that's crazy,
Still have it.
crazy.
Yes.
But the amount of, that was what was so inspiring to be able to see, is you're putting in the work times 8, right? Where I'd look at other people that would want to be a part of the site, the team, and all this other stuff, and they were doing half of year 1. Like, so you're doing like times 8, and then they're doing like,
I took a lot of pride in actually, I took so much pride in writing for Elite.
Yeah.
Because I always say I got lucky. I say this to coaches.
I don't say that.
Well, I got lucky because when I started researching strength and conditioning, there was Elite FTS and Westside. Louis would put.
Yeah.
I didn't get confused coming across so much bullshit, and so I went so far down the rabbit hole, reading everything, every Q&A, and also Joe was putting out stuff, so I read all of his stuff, and I didn't have the opportunity to get confused by 70 million websites.
Yeah.
I lived on your website. And also, back then you had to pay a crap ton hosting. Remember what?
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
It was, people don't know.
No, they have no idea. And this January is 25 years that we've been in business. And what I wanted to do this year with the podcast is bring back some of the people that were a part of the very,
cool.
very beginning of that are still in the industry. And oddly enough, because I prided myself and Jim as well, because he was a big part of that, on selecting people that had the passion, that had the dedication, that were going to be difference makers in the industry. And yourself, Joe DeFranco, Martin Rooney, all these people, they're still in the industry now.
And it's
right?
very rare.
It's very rare.
A lot of
Very
people
rare.
just, I don't even know what, I think they got to a point where they were like, F this, it's too much. But if I win the lottery, and I don't play the lottery, but I always say, if I win the lottery, I'm still probably going to train a group of kids 2 to 3 times a week. I'm still going to write and talk about old weights and old 5x5. And I'm going to still go and buy barbells that I don't need, but they're from like 1955. And I need to wonder who did it, because, I know you talk a lot about how everything you learned in the gym. I have this kind of like internal conversation with myself. So I was like, man, it's interesting how training gave me this life. Now it turned it into a business, but also saved my life. If I didn't go to the gym and couldn't go through this hard physical training, I think my mind would be in a real bad space. I always say, this is iron therapy. You want to learn how to control your life? Go do hard shit in the gym. Go find yourself doing heavy squats, or 20 rep squats, or sprint up a hill and then do it again. The hard physicality behind it, it molded me. And
wasn't depression why you started in the first place?
It really, it wasn't. I kind of was started training the end of 8th grade.
Okay.
And I was over Jim's house last night after we ate, and I said, what's interesting is kids today start training for sports. I'm going to train for football. I'm going to train for baseball. Da-da-da-da. When I grew up in Edison, New Jersey, I remember I got my bike stolen in 3rd grade. With a group of us are playing football. These 2 bigger kids walk up. They just fucking take my bike, zip through, push us out of the way. Nothing. And I was learning that being weak has a consequence. And then it's a place, Edison, where somebody was always looking to kick your ass, take your bike, beat you up, bully you, scare you. There was always a problem. And I remember trying to train, trying to work out, as we call it. My older brother had weights in his room downstairs. He had bodybuilding magazines, books, but he didn't really get into training. He would always run. And I remember trying to work out in 6th grade, and I was like, I did it a few times, and I had no oomph behind it. 7th grade, I remember for 3 weeks I trained, then I stopped. And I, to this day, remember internally, ask myself, what's your problem? How come you just can't, consistently train? So then it was 2 weeks before 8th grade finished. I go downstairs to my brother's room, and I'm I'm going to start I'm going to start training. I didn't join wrestling yet. I had played soccer. You know, my dad's from Romania and Israel, so he didn't understand like baseball or even football. So I'm playing like kind of European sports, so to speak. I go to my brother's room. I open up Arnold's Encyclopedia that my grandfather bought us. And I just flip it open, and he has like these beginner workouts. And my brother has barbells with the spin lock, and I start squatting that day. And I still remember like have to pick it up off the ground, put it on my back. And so I got, it was like the bar, put a 10 on. I got to 65 pounds, and I remember I do my squats, and then I was like too weak to get it off of my back. And I was like, oh, like what do I do? So I like turn around, I walk backwards, I sit on his bed, and I just like lay back and dump it. And so, you know, where am I going with this? Like the depression and what it does for my mind. Freshman year, I joined the wrestling team. Why did I join the wrestling team? My brother joined it. He was 2 years older than me, joined it the previous year in high school. He's like, this is the best sport. I love this sport. But my brother grew up a little differently than me, where like people would bully him and he would fight. He'd fight anybody. He didn't give a shit. So he kind of grew up getting into fights. I never like would fight back. I'd get bullied. I remember getting punched in the face, and like I didn't even know what to do. So freshman year, I go out for wrestling, and it's not like in New Jersey today, there's no freshman team for most sports. They're gone. There's not enough kids. I had to wrestle off to get on the freshman team. The whole team is with kids who started wrestling in first grade and third grade. So we wrestle. There's wrestle-offs going all throughout the thing. I remember lifting this kid and like slamming him down to his back real hard, to the point where it scared me. I could have pinned him, but I eased up. He gets out. He fights back. He pins me. After that day, everybody had a starting spot, except me. I had no starting spot. So I had to wrestle off every day. And what they did was there was like 60 kids on the team. Everybody sit down around and watch me get my fucking ass kicked in a wrestle off. And I wrestled off every day before each match, the day before each match. And it wasn't like today, hey, his feelings are hurt. We got to be worried. Everybody watched me. And I still remember like the team captain, like reffing one of the wrestle-offs. And I'm like, on my back, I used to get destroyed. And he's like, you're pinned. Boom. Like, don't waste my fucking time. And I didn't realize that was starting to really fuck with me, like just destroying me. Then the end of the year, things start to click. I start getting some takedowns. I start beating some kids, but I couldn't beat the kid in front of me. And then they say to me, while I was like beating some of them, they're like, Zach, all winter we've been betting on when you're going to quit. We've been putting money on the week that you're going to quit. And when they said that to me, I said to them, I'm thinking to myself, I didn't know I could quit. I didn't even know it was allowed. I thought I signed up for this, and now I'm in it. Now with training, I stopped lifting during the season. Our practices would go from 3 to 5:30, 3 to 6. And my brother was like, you go running. That's how you train. So as now that we know as coaches, so when the season starts, you just stop getting strong. That's what we do. We run, we do conditioning. I'd go out and run 3 miles, 5 miles every other day. And I'm weak as shit going against kids who've been wrestling since age 6. So season ends, I go and start training in my brother's room. We have a solo flex. You remember that shit?
Oh yeah. That's kind of like accommodating resistance now a little bit, right?
Because those bands were so thick, everything was slow motion.
Yeah.
And also the information I came across was completely wrong. I'm reading Flex magazine. They're saying, squeeze the muscle. Don't worry about the weight. Move it slow. I never saw a deadlift at all. You know, everything was this like pump up bullshit. So I got bigger, but I didn't get strong. That next year, I went 10-5, but I learned that if I'm going to win, I have to train. And, you know, talking about work ethic, guys were not really like lifting, but there was a few real tough dudes on the team. One of them was a state champ. They would lift at the local gym. but they did one body part a day, 30 to 35 sets. So if it was leg day, 5 sets of back squats, 5 sets of front squats, leg press 5 sets, hack squat 5 sets, leg extension, leg curl 5. Like, you don't get strong that way. So going through wrestling and doing that kind of training, spending 2 hours in a gym, 3 hours in a gym, running 5 miles every other night, it didn't build my body. It didn't build performance muscle. And so I worked crazy hard and lost a lot and fucked up my body and fucked up my mind. But what it did is, as I got older, when I got into college, I learned how to like harness some anger. And so my freshman year in college, I was like, fuck this sport. I hate wrestling. I'm not wrestling. I'm going to go into bodybuilding because I could control my own effort. Like, you're talking about these articles. I knew that if I didn't have a genetic gift or whatever gift, the very thing I could control is work ethic. So I'm like, I'll write a million articles. I will outwork anybody. And so freshman year, I got like, I had this anger. So I go back to the high school to wrestle, and there was some good kids on the team. One kid was a county champ, and I remember driving there. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to fucking kill everybody. And I'm like, nobody will score a point on me. And where did I learn that lesson? 4 years prior, I went to a intensive wrestling camp, and I was too young to grasp lessons. Do you ever look back and say, man, I just didn't grasp what this... Oh, yeah. And so John Smith was an Olympic champ, a world champ. And he's like, you have to have goals before you wrestle. He's like, maybe your goal is pin somebody in the second period. Maybe your goal is score 10 points before the second period is over. That didn't register with me. Whatever, not ready emotionally, blah, blah, blah. I'm driving there, and I said, nobody will score a point on me in practice today. I was not a county champ in high school. County champ is a pretty big deal. You have like 18, 19 teams. You do that, you're going to qualify for the states. The kid that was the county champ the year before, I remember destroying him. Scored no points on me. And I had started training slightly differently. I started training for strength. I started doing like weird shit, like carrying one dumbbell like this, but like heavy and I started feeling how when you train for strength, it does something for your mind. And that's when I learned that I have the power to control my emotional state by going through physical struggle. And then I had, of course, those ups and downs. But we could jump. I mean, Dave, like we could go back, we could go forward.
Well, what's interesting, because we were talking about coaching earlier, younger athletes, and, listening to your story into wrestling, I have a similar story, but different, because, the first couple of years of wrestling, I was a fish, right? So just, not scoring at all. Same kind of, but in the school that I was in, there were wrestle-offs for every weight class. I mean, it was full. It was stacked. And I happened to come across, they had the weight training with a little universal machine. I just did whatever they did, with everybody else there. But I was stronger than everybody else. I just didn't put one and one together with the whole thing. But then I ended up in a powerlifting gym at a very young age.
What was the name of that gym?
Finley Barbell Club.
Finley.
Was where I ended up. And then that year, that off season, it was pure strength work. It was basically powerlifting work with some stuff in there that was more 1,000 drop steps, a lot of technical work as well, because the one coach liked the work ethic that I had in the weight room, because he also lifted weight. So he would show me basics, just do 1,000 drop steps a day and all that. That next year I go back, because I had adequate and proper strength training.
That's right.
I fucked everybody up, right? So for me, I saw the correlation between the harder work and paying off, to where in your story you had the harder work but shitty training.
That's right.
And it didn't correlate. And
cancels out the work. Right? It doesn't. You could work as hard as you want on the wrong stuff.
Yeah.
And ironically, as we said earlier, like before we recorded, we're seeing still a lot of wrong stuff with this overabundance of information.
Yeah.
So I trained the wrong way because of the wrong information. I was reading the wrong stuff. In the late 80s, where were we getting information from? Muscle and Fitness, Flex, or if you were lucky, as you did, you had somebody
in the
mentor
gym.
you.
Yeah.
Now, if I back up a little bit, I started training, it was 1989, early June. So I always kind of go with June as like my anniversary of strength training. That summer, we go to Israel. My grandparents were still alive. My parents would go more frequently. We would go like every other year. We go to Israel, and I'm like, have 6 weeks of lifting experience. And we're like bothering my grandfather. I'm telling him, if I don't find a gym, like my muscles are going to wither away. You know, I look back and that's exactly what I'm telling him. Like, was I on crack? Like, who thinks like that at age 13? I have no muscle. I'm 120 pounds. He's like, there's no gyms here. There's no gyms. He's like, but I heard of this guy. They call him Andre the Giant. He lives in town. He has weights in his house. That was like the gist that we had.
Yeah.
So my grandparents don't own a car. My father owns a car. My father rents a car. We go and find Andre's address, and everything is found by, hey, do you know Andre the Giant? What's happening?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you have to know people who know people.
Yeah.
So my grandfather knows everybody in this little town. Somebody tells him where Andre the Giant home is. He lived near my dad's mom. So it was like a 5-minute car ride. So we go to his house. We knock on the door. In Israel during the day, things close from like 2 to 4, 1 to 3, like siesta. This guy answers the door. He's wearing like shorts. And I still remember him, like round shoulders, like big chest, not ripped abs, but he looked like a weightlifter, like thick, like cannonball muscles. And I was like, oh shit. And he looked tired, like he woke up from the nap. My grandfather and dad like say, hi, you know, these are my boys. They want to do some weightlifting or bodybuilding, whatever they tell him. And we heard you do this. He's like, yep, whatever, these nights of the week you come here and it costs this much money. So they're like, okay, we'll come back tonight. And my brother and I are like, yes, like it's on. And I'm planning my workout, and my workouts are just carbon copy of Arnold's high volume 5 sets of 10 of everything. We go there, we get there early because I'm not showing up at 6. I need to be there early. And it's called a flat. So he has the upstairs and the downstairs. So instead of like bedrooms with like furniture, it's like this bedroom has like the universal machine. This bedroom has some fixed barbells. It was just like machines. But then in the corner, Andre had a squat stand. That's it. He had a squat stand and a barbell and bumper plates. The ceiling was cut out so he could go overhead, lift the weights over. Then the floor had like, he cut it and it looked like rubber was thrown in there so he could drop the weights. I've never seen weightlifting before. And my brother and I start doing like lat pull downs, tricep push downs. I'm doing my exercises. I see Andre doing like cleans, split jerks. And I remember, I have this memory etched in my mind. I'm thinking like, this guy's an idiot. He's going to hurt himself. Look at him. He's doing such dumb stuff. So my brother's like, Zach, what are you doing today? I'm like, I'm gonna do back and biceps. I'm doing 3 sets of this, 5 sets of that, blah, blah, blah. People start coming into the gym, which is his house. There's like 12, 13 people. You know, there's music going. People are going around in a circuit. And then I start doing bent over row with like 40 pounds, fixed barbell. But my back is like hunched over. And he screams. And it's like...
Andre?
Yeah. Andre screams in Romanian. And it's like, remember in Rocky IV when the Russian coach says to like Drago, he's like, Shagura, Shagura, Shagura. It was like that. He like screams at me. The music stops. Everybody stops their exercise and freezes. He's like, points, like, move. He demonstrates bent over row, flat back. He's rowing it to his neck instead of the stomach. Then he shows me, he's like, look, like this. And I'm like in shock. So I'm like, I don't know if I started crying in his house or as I leave. So I'm like in shock. And I walk out of his house and then I'm across the street on somebody's front lawn. I'm crying. A couple minutes later, there's like 6 guys on the front lawn of his house. And they're like saying in broken English, they're like, come back. He won't make you cry anymore. And I'm like, I'm not crying. I'm fine. I don't go back at all. And we get picked up like 2 hours later. My grandfather's in the car with my dad. And they're like, why are you out on somebody else's front lawn? My brother never comes out to check on me. Like, fuck this kid. Like, I'll just work out. And I'm like, he screamed at me. My grandfather's like, yeah, he's the expert. He tells you what to do. He's like, who are you? You don't know nothing. You argue with Andre the Giant, he calls him. He's like, you embarrass me. This is an embarrassment to the family. And I look back, Andre never taught me weightlifting. He never said, you know what? You want to learn to train? Come here. I'll teach you how to do cleans and squats. He did his thing in the corner. And I always look back and say, man, if he would have taught me for those 3 weeks, you come here, you train in the morning. I would have slept in that gym. But I didn't know. And you know what? Maybe he didn't know. He escaped Romania when my dad left Romania during communism. They're probably like, that kid is such a chicken shit. Can you imagine like what he thinks of, like, imagine kids of today? So I always say, that could have changed my life. If I would have learned how to be strong and powerful and how to train like that, I may not be a strength coach today.
Yeah.
I may have been a great wrestler and then gone into a normal career. But because I got my ass kicked and then I learned how to like change my life through strength training, and then I kind of accidentally got into helping other people, then that's how I became a strength coach. But I wonder if Andre took me under his wing and I was doing weightlifting in 1989, who was doing Olympic lifts in 89? I have no clue.
Yeah.
But I always say, man, that would have changed my life. But for some reason, the iron gods decided Zach will just, do his concentration curls and leg extensions and cables and machines. And so I didn't grasp proper training, I think, until I went through enough pain in my life to start chasing strength as like my number one thing.
Through your journey, did the Iron Gods plant somebody there? Like if it was in Diamond Gym or something like that,
Yes,
was at some point, was there somebody that was that mentor?
Yes.
Because maybe you can have the wrong messenger, or you could just not be ready for the message either.
I think I was not ready.
Yeah.
Absolutely not ready. And so I keep that in mind when I'm working with kids today. They may not be ready. They need these different forms of communication versus going for the throat right away. So I started training. The first gym I joined was a YMCA, which was very small. It was downstairs near the boiler room, near the pool. So it just stunk like sweat and chlorine.
Yeah.
But guys, everything was York barbell equipment. And there was a lot of people kind of doing stuff, but there was one guy that stood out to me. He didn't mentor me, but I started taking notice to what he did. His name was George. He always wore like sweats, covered up, but you could see him stretching through the sweats, like his traps, his arms. I would be there before George. He'd come in, do 2 or 3 exercises, but he'd spend 20 to 30 minutes on each thing. I would do 15 exercises. I'd be there before him, after him. I didn't grasp what he was doing, but I'd watch him like barbell bench, like endless sets. Then he'd go and do like barbell row or pull-ups or dips, endless sets, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 set every other minute. He was a tank. When he wouldn't be in there, people would be like, George is on steroids.
Right.
George, anybody who's big or strong, automatic, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, kind of thinking like, I need to do more volume like George. But I never had somebody say, the way for you, if you want to be an athlete in wrestling or anything, is you got to stop benching those 25-pound dumbbells, dude. You need to stop worrying about the pump and try like lifting heavy weights. So some guys would make comments to me, right? I would bench press, and I remember reading about benching, and they would tell you in those books, like those old books, come to your neck.
Oh, neck press.
Yeah. Why is my shoulder destroyed? Because I'm always benching to the neck.
Yeah.
I do forced reps and drop sets and all these crazy intensity techniques, but I can't even bench 95 pounds. So why am I doing forced reps? There wasn't enough people saying, this is how you train for sport, because at that time, in the late 80s, the early 90s, we knew bodybuilding. I think there were pockets of guys. Like in Ohio, you had the powerlifting legends. In New Jersey, there was no like powerlifting legends, but bodybuilding was big. And so I was learning from bodybuilders, and ironically, I just didn't grasp it. The best bodybuilders were lifting like powerlifters. They were very big. So I went from Metuchen YMCA, and every time I moved to another gym, I always, in my mind, was like, I have to earn my way there. I can't go there till I weigh this many pounds. So in high school, I started out weighing about 120, 122 pounds. By the time wrestling season started, I was 135. Sophomore year, I get up to like 150. I had joined Apollon Gym. Now I'm training at Apollon Gym, but then the next level is dynamic fitness, where this guy welded all the equipment together. And it was like everybody there is a monster. I was like, damn, I got to get better. I got to get stronger to go there. None of my friends were lifting. I had one buddy that was on a track team, so we would run together on the weekends. But I had nobody that was like big into lifting. Actually, one of my friends, but we did bodybuilding. When I got to dynamic fitness, that was like another jump up. I started seeing powerlifters. But those guys threw me for a loop because one guy was short and very fat. One guy was tall and had like no muscle. But the bodybuilders looked, they had this appearance. So I wanted that. So I remember like just trying to kind of copy them. And I still didn't grasp really pushing for strength. And also technique was never taught to me. So like little things like, how do you bench press as a full body lift? Press your legs in, dig your shoulder blades in. I remember benching all through high school feeling like I'm falling off the bench. Nobody ever said, spread your legs out, drive them in, pull your shoulders down. And so the training for sport, I was training for show. And that is what's actually kids are still doing today. They go to a gym, a commercial gym, and they're still doing pump and squeeze stuff. And now I know that's working out. And the other way is training. They don't understand that. And I think some people are kind of like forced into one lane, right? This is what we do. My dad has me doing this, blah, blah, blah. Or you have to go through a lot of pain and force you to like research stuff. So how did I start research? How did I come across Elite FTS? I researched Russian wrestling training after I tore my ACL, because I knew the Russians were the best at the time in the early 2000s. And when I researched Russian wrestling training, you guys were writing about Russian conjugate method. And then I came across Milo's master thesis. And then I was like, oh my God, this website's talking about how Russians train. And then it was like down the rabbit hole. And that's when I said, when I was getting that knee surgery, I remember when they were wheeling me down, I was like, when I get out of this knee surgery, I'm going to like make sure no wrestler, athlete goes through the pain that I went through, training so much but achieving poopy results, shit results. And I was on a mission, and maybe the Iron Gods spoke to me then.
Well, it's interesting because I'm contrasting, your journey as a teen coming up through, to my own, and I'm sitting here so grateful that I had the people that I had, because the first time I was basically thrown into a gym after a couple years of screwing around at home and shit like that, it was powerlifters showing me all the things you're talking about. You leg drive, grab the bar, do this, get this tight, push your feet out, do this, all that was, drilled into my head just the same way I learned how to play football, how I learned how to be a guard, how I learned how to be a tackle, how I learned how to wrestle, all the skills, it was all there.
Yes.
And then when I went the bodybuilding route for a short period of time, it was the same thing. It was the bodybuilders that were competitive, pulling me aside, like, what the hell are you doing? You have to work your lats, pull your elbows, slapping my lats, flex this, don't do that. You're cheating too much. Now you're doing it too strict. All this was just kind of part of the whole gym environment.
Correct.
But it still wasn't that easy, because if I When I got into college, it changed a little bit because now it wasn't the same gym I was introduced to. It was a different gym. Powerlifting was easy because I was strong. So it was easy to find a crew to be able to train with. But with the bodybuilding was different because then it's like, okay, where do the best guys train? I need to train there, but I can't just walk up to them and say, hey, can you help me?
Yes.
I had to earn my right.
I love that.
You know, so
earn the right.
Yeah. So it's like, where do they train? What time do they train? I'm going to train at the same time.
Yeah.
And, you know, just do our own separate things. And then if they need a spot.
But you're watching.
Yeah.
Through the corner of your eye. What's the biggest guy in the gym doing for legs?
But he's also watching. You know, is this kid working hard or not working hard?
Yes.
Right. So at a certain point, there comes that, hey, can you give me a spot? Then it's like,
that.
you know, stuff like that. Then it's like courting, right? So like a courting type thing. And then it's like, yeah, hey, what are you training for? Then it's like, I'm thinking about doing a show. And it's like thinking about, like, no, you're doing one. And I'm like, okay, how do I do this? And like, okay, here's how you diet. Here's how you do this.
You want to come into our world. You're not going to do it. You're not going to come and do it just a little bit. But you're right. They were watching you.
Yeah.
And nobody's coming to say hi to you or offer you help until they see that you've put in consistency.
Oh, yeah.
They know if you're, they knew if you were like a half-asser. Let's see if this kid disappears after he is done with his 3-month membership. Let's see if he's really gonna stick it out. And I think that was also part of like growing up as a young man, a young teenager, was you learn to have conversations with people older than you. You learned if you saw the big, strong guy training alone for a random reason, normally he had training partners, you were waiting for the right opportunity to say, do you need a spot? Because your hope was, if I spot him good, he might give me one tip on how to grow my back.
Yeah.
And you were earning everything. And I think that's why I value knowledge so much, especially in guys like yourself, because there's that saying of, I blood, sweat, and tears. You actually did bleed, sweat, and cry to achieve and go through all those things.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of earning it mentality makes you value it so much more because it hurts. You go through pain to achieve something. And so when something's easy, when something's handed to you, you don't value it, right? You're a coach. I just want to, let me give this to this kid. They don't have the money for this. Let me give it to them. Most of the time, they ain't going to show up. There's no value attached to it. It's free. There's no pain involved. As a kid, I would pay for my own gym membership. So I had a job. I would mow people's lawns. And so a gym membership back then was actually more expensive. I remember Dynamic Fitness was $45 a month. Or if I signed up for 3 months, it was $105. I'll do all 3 months in full. I get that card. Fucking that card meant something to me.
Yeah.
And then wearing a shirt from Dynamic Fitness meant I felt like I got to represent this. I have to represent this gym and I honestly didn't feel that when I was wrestling. I didn't feel like I had to represent Edison High School because I don't know, coaches just kind of like, you're on your own, you know.
It's
maybe
different though, right? Because I didn't either when I was part of a team, right? But when it was representing a gym, because when you first, with the gyms that I can count on one hand how many gyms I've been a part of my entire life. It's not many. It's because I always vetted out like where the best people are. But you would get there and you would see the clique. Like, this is the group. And like, I want to be in that group.
Yes.
Like, how do I get in that group? And you don't ask how you get in that group because that's the first way to never be in the group.
Correct.
Right?
Once you ask, you're out.
You're fucked. You know, and I knew this. Like, you just had to like figure it out. So then once you were part of that group, very tribal because you fucking earned it. Yeah. You know, you earned it mentally, physically, you earned it in all these different ways. And then there's responsibility. Now I'm part of this group, right? Now I have to represent, you know, in whatever and this is true all the way through Westside as well. You know, I just kept moving my way to the bigger groups until I got to a group I couldn't get to be the best of. And, but it was kind of all that way, you know, even back then at Westside, there were visitors and stuff like that, but I believe I was the first person to move from anywhere to go in there. but you just didn't show up there.
I didn't realize how, I never even thought of it like that, the tribal feeling that we actually needed. And it's a lot what's missing today because, as we said, you go to a quote unquote normal gym, everybody's got headphones in. So how can I see Dave over there training and ask him a question? Or what if I'm doing something wrong and you're like, you know what, I'm going to help that kid. How are you going to help me? I'm checked out. I'm listening to whatever's going on here and I'm on my phone. And
I think it lowers your accountability too, because if I'm part of Hard Body's gym, which or a Powerhouse gym or the Flex Connection or Finley Barbell Club or Westside Barbell Club, and people know that I've earned my way into that clique, well, then I'm accountable. I'm accountable to represent, which means I need to compete. Yeah. I can't just fuck off.
I can't just be here as part of the scenery.
Yes.
I need to
represent.
I need to and contribute, which is so interesting. Like Dave Hoff mentioned it in Westside versus the World. Yeah. It's like, you're not going to come here and just take from this place. And so with nobody even telling me to do so, I remember being at Dynamic and finishing my training. And then I start cleaning the gym. I start putting weights where they belonged. And then I would sometimes come in and just do homework at the gym, sitting at the front desk to hear all those weights clanging together. And the guy says to me, he's like, doing homework today, huh?
Yeah.
He's like, just got to be amongst the weights? I said, yep. He's like, I get it. And I may have been a sophomore, so I would have been 15 years old at the time. And they make that protein shake. I felt better. Always felt better in the gym, and I didn't grasp enough of how I could wrestle better until I was out of wrestling. And I remember Matt Wenning saying, like, a lot of times, if you're a coach, by the time you understand and master, and I never, by the way, think of myself as a master of anything, but you're really good at something, you're past your prime in doing it. The real great ones, understand it. And so when you mentioned, like, being part of that gym, I kind of remember our earlier years of the underground strength gym had that. Whereas today, it's not, we're missing that. And, it reminds me of, like, as Louis would go on through the years to talk about Westside, I felt him saying those things about Westside, and I could tell his heart was broken. I could tell. And I remember telling my buddy, John Wellborn, we were talking about Louis, and I said, I think Louis died of a broken heart.
Could be, because I had conversations with him about it, and there's a lot of different factors that changed. I think one of the biggest ones were there became other options for people.
Yes.
So when I was there, if I got fed up or pissed off and said, fuck it, I had nowhere else to go. I had to figure it out. Where as soon as there became other places to go, it became, I don't have to deal with this bullshit. I'll just go somewhere else.
Which I understand that with people. Yeah, look, if somebody wants to leave my gym and there's something better, then that means I got to get better at something. Or maybe, just maybe, we're not a good fit, which is also okay.
Yeah,
You
and
can't be for everyone.
There's in any tribe culture or whatever it was, in any of them I've ever been a part of, there's always roles that people need to fill, so you may not have to be the strongest. I was never the greatest. I was good. I was a little better than good. I was never the greatest, but my obsession was high as fuck, right? So if I knew, and this is probably short-sighted looking back, I think I could have been better than what I was if I would have believed it. But I always felt could be really, really good, but never first. I could be second, third, but never first.
Mindset is everything.
So I had to learn more than anybody else to be able to bridge that gap.
I think I did too.
So I
don't know why.
Yeah, so I went down from high school. I started going down rabbit holes of strength and conditioning, and my whole life has been going down those rabbit holes because I always figured if I can't be the best, then I can learn more than the average, and I can be somewhere between average and the best because I just know better, right? So then a lot of these places, my role then became, like the educator. Like, this might be better. And then figuring out how to bring those ideas to the table without head honcho. Correct. If it's before Louis, there's always, somebody,
Yes, there's
there's
always
always a pecking order.
Yes.
To bring these ideas to the person that's the top of the hierarchy without insulting them, right? Because they think they know all, because and they do. I always felt those little cliques knew all the answers I needed to know. Then I would get in them and
it's
I realized
a gang.
sometimes
it is a gang.
Yeah, sometimes I realize, they really don't know anything more than anybody else.
But maybe they are bigger than you, or they were around longer. And you're right. So there is the pecking order.
Yeah.
And just speaking of like that pride, it's weird that I never felt it in wrestling, but now I know a great wrestler as an individual cannot be great without a great teammate. And then if you have multiple great teammates, a great team, then things can really take off. So of course, looking back, I wish I had a mentor in wrestling, a mentor in strength and conditioning, but that's life. That shaped me to understand the power of mentorship. It got me to look back, and I still analyze old training methods like, oh, that's why I was weak. And that's why I got injured, because I was, adding more conditioning on top of conditioning.
Well, it's also leadership too, right? Because it's a big part of, I'm very introverted, right? So I never felt I belonged, so even if I was on the football team, wrestling team, track, whatever it was, I never felt like I belonged. I always felt like an outcast.
I feel that.
Now I could still win because I worked harder. That I figured out, but I was never felt I was part of it, right? Now in this other world, then I felt part of that.
Me too. I don't know, like.
Well, it's whoever was in that group that was that mentor made you feel like you belonged, right?
I think training, the way it made me feel was step one. Mm-hmm. How good I felt when I worked hard and trained. And I also would use my imagination, because I remember reading like Arnold's Education of a Bodybuilder. And he really emphasized in that book, which is like part autobiography, how training transformed him, and people gave him respect because he got bigger. And then he would use his imagination to build muscle, and then he gave himself confidence. So he's in the army, but then he escapes over the wall to enter the Junior Mr. Europe. And so those like stories, I tried to like live them. And I wonder if I read books on like a wrestler who was lifting weights, I would have tried to emulate that. And so it's interesting how like times in your life can guide you on a certain road.
Almost definitely. And I had, as we're having this conversation, I'm processing a lot of things. And, I had training partners that were longtime training partners, right? And you don't succeed without them. Correct. So it's a back squat. Maybe you miss a bench, or maybe you almost miss a bench, but they save you from, all this other stuff. That is going to create over a period of time a sense of belonging.
Yes.
Right? Because you're in this together.
Suffer together.
Yeah. So especially if they show, that's, that was the mark of a good training partner. They'd always show up. It's consistent, was huge. Because in your mind, it could be a heavy day. And then if he doesn't show up, he just fucked everything up. So he's no longer a training partner.
That sucked the energy out of me. Where's Dave? I need Dave today. How am I going to lift? Who's going to give me a lift off? How am I going to squat this weight today? I need him there. And what's interesting is you're talking about like the work ethic, that people loved you. People wanted me as their training partners because I had so much energy and I would push them. They liked it. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, why aren't they excited like I am? In just being young and not maybe catching on to things myself, I didn't grasp it. And then, you get older, you always hear I'd run into a guys be like, oh, wait till you're my age. You won't be doing this. You're going to be married with kids. Mm-hmm. You're going to have no time. I remember thinking to myself, I'm not like you. And I didn't have kids or any of that shit at the time. But I just remember thinking to myself, like, I am not like you, man. I'm not going to quit. Like, I will lift anything. I'm not going to quit because I'm busy. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting. We had a conversation so long ago, Dave, because I told you about Dynamic Fitness closing. And I said to you, I don't know where everybody went. And they closed, I think, in like 96, 97. and it was hardcore, and it would be packed in there, and there was nowhere else hardcore to go. And so this was like 20 years ago. You said, oh, I know where they all went. They're all lifting at home. I'm setting up their home gyms. But in the mid-90s, I don't think anybody had a home gym. There was nobody putting a squat rack in their garage. So I always like look back and I'm like, did everybody just quit because Dynamic Fitness closed the doors that day? Like I would just...
Sometimes that happens, you know, if it's a big tribe,
Yep.
you know, big place, because they try to seek and find what they had and they can't find it.
Which is heartbreaking
Yeah.
when you can't find it.
Yeah, because it's a culture that a lot of these places can create. And then if it goes away, then they go to a different gym. Like I still to this day, I don't think I can train exercise wise. I have to have a purpose and, you know, that kind of stuff.
Right.
I have no interest in that, you know, because I've always been in these cultish type culture.
Right.
I mean, cult culture, same type of thing, right?
Yeah.
Same word, just shorter.
I'm totally good with it.
And it's that's what drove me and what I like, you know, more, because it creates what we're talking about, that security bond, you know, belonging and all this other kind of stuff. It's just the roles change over a period of time. But like yourself, I had people, you know, you're not going to do this when you're older, and fuck, I'm 55 now. So guess what? I'm still doing it.
Still doing
You
it.
just got to, you know, change, you know, how it is. And I don't think that Mike Israetel was the one that actually brought this up during the podcast that we had, is I used to think those people had bad intent. And I used to use it as revenge to be able to drive me.
Yeah, I
like,
know.
fuck you.
I know that
I can
feeling.
make a life
Oh,
out
yeah.
of this. Like, you guys told me I couldn't make a life out
That's
of you.
right.
Fuck you. I can.
Yes.
And he said something, and I don't know if he knows how much impact it had. He said, I don't think anybody meant any harm. I think they were actually looking after your best interest.
Yeah, he's right.
And
He's
it's
right.
true, right? But it drove me. You know, it drove me. So if I had to recreate what was heard or change the message or interpret it differently
Yeah.
to be able to get what I had, then I was fucking doing it.
That era of 80s, 90s, you know, our parents said, hey, you got to get a job. You got to get health insurance, pension, benefits. You never came across somebody who's like, hey, this was my passion. I started it. They didn't explain it like that, right? Somebody who loved cars, was working on cars in their garage, wasn't like, Dave, this is why I have an auto body shop. This was you just never heard those stories. So, you know, your era of starting a business was really like, entrepreneurs was like, that was like a word of like, oh, that dude's...
Oh, it was crazy. Because,
Yeah.
you know, in high school and, you know, all I wanted to do was train. I wanted to make a living training. You know, that's all I ever wanted to do. And looking back at that time, there was probably two strength coaches, Boyd Epley and Buddy Morris. I think Boyd was the first and Buddy was the second. So that was it. Two strength coaches. We had no way of knowing they even had jobs because
Yeah.
there was no internet. The only personal trainers were like celebrity trainers,
That's right.
right? So I'm trying to cut this path through college and saying, you know, I want to train people. And them saying, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, I'll do it 12. I'll be at the gym at 6 a.m. until lunch. Then I'll
Yeah.
train on my own. Then I'll be back till 10. Think about it. Like the group training was even like, if you were doing group training, it was all like aerobic and body pump.
Yeah, I couldn't do that even with my clients.
Exactly. It wasn't like strength based. Or you'd see somebody who was like training bodybuilders, but you're like, do those guys even have money to pay that guy?
Yeah.
You know, thinking of all that stuff, it's really interesting, like looking back to see how it's evolved. That, you know, the one guy, speaking of staying power, like Gunnar Peterson, still training people. He's a worker. I don't want to train people all day, but I still love the ability, if a athlete is dedicated enough, to be able to mold somebody into just like a bad motherfucker.
Oh, yeah.
Like
yeah.
that to me is still super exciting.
Yeah, so the thing that was driving me through college and all of that was I didn't care. Like if they said there's no profession here, I didn't give a fuck. I was just studying stuff that was going to make me better at training, which is all I cared about. Like, I'll figure it out.
Yes.
Doesn't matter. I'll figure it out. So if I go through all this time and still have to work in a factory, fuck it. At least I know how to train better. I know how to eat better. I know how to do all these things better. And if something opens up, good. If not, fuck it. At least I learned, you know, and that was my whole philosophy. Then after you graduated, it's like, oh shit, now what?
I thought I was going to own a gym. Now that it's so funny, as we talk, we start to have memories. So in high school, let's say my dad was taking us somewhere, visiting family. If we passed by a gym, like a Powerhouse gym or a Gold's gym, I'd be like, can we go there on whatever Saturday so I could interview the owner? I thought the owner was the guy always working the desk. So, all right, I'll take you there. Now I start like asking questions. They're like giving a 15-year-old a tour as I'm asking him business questions. What time do you get here? How much money does it cost to get all this equipment? I remember seeing an advertisement in the newspaper of a gym for sale. My dad calls, and it's Richie Gaspari. Richie Gaspari had a gym, but he leased all the equipment. He was in like a affluent area, and he's like, oh, my son trains at Diamond Gym. And he's like, oh, yeah. Diamond Gym would never survive here. And I remember when he was on the phone, he's like, you said Diamond Gym wouldn't survive there. It was like, I feel my heart like hurt right now. I was like, what? Like, hardcore can't survive everywhere? I thought it should be everywhere. And then as we get older and look back, you're like, we're like the last of the Mohicans. Yeah. We think it's for everybody. And then you go out to like a normal setting. Like I had to get a new iPhone a couple months ago. My phone would like not charge. And I didn't use cloud. So I'm stuck in the Apple store 2.5 hours. Oh, you can't leave. You're like a prisoner. And I'm, as a coach, I kind of always am like assessing people. I'll be like out to dinner and I'm looking at people's posture, their foot position. What I noticed in 2.5 hours is not one person looked like they exercised or could do a push-up. And here I am, I'm 46 at that time. I just turned 47. I'm thinking to myself, it took me that long to realize that even exercise and strength training is not as popular as we think it is. We are our own world.
It's a bubble.
I don't know how many people I saw in 2.5 hours, but if you've ever been to an Apple store in New Jersey, I must have seen 500 people. I don't see one person that looked like they did strength training in any, whatever you want to call it, bodybuilding, exercise. And then I realized, whoa, it kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, you get a distorted view of reality when you live in your own little bubble.
And I'll openly admit, I like to kind of like admit the mistakes I make, because for people listening, I think sometimes when you're watching, you think, oh, that guy owned a gym. It might be easy, or he's got so many Instagram followers. This must be easy for him. And I want people to know, like, there's a lot of stuff that's not easy. There's just, and it's good to know it, not because I'm trying to scare people, but you got to know that, like, I guess what we've been like harping on is staying power. Or the old Rocky speech, like, how many times can you get hit and get back up? And it's like, I didn't know I could quit. I didn't know quitting was an option. And here I am. And you know what? In business, as you know, sometimes you have to quit things. That don't work. We need to quit that. We need to move on. Or XYZ was popular at that time. That's not working. Let's move on. Or in training, my shoulders aren't good. I need to get a yoke bar. Period. End of story. You have to quit certain things to move on. But in certain things, like, I tell people, like, I don't know if I could quit being a strength coach.
That's the quitting thing when, God, it was going way back to when I was getting pinned all the time. So 11, 12, whatever it was. I was in a Hallmark store with my mom, right? And right at the checkout, they used to have these little, they're little cards. They're wallet cards, that have little sayings and quotes on them. And I had the one that said it was a don't quit poem, and my mom said, do you want that? I said, yeah. So she buys it. And I had that in my wallet all the way up until 2 years ago, and it actually just fell apart. I would read that every single day. And I think that, the mentality that I have to not quit, the no quitting type of thing, it's to a fault. That's kept me in things longer than it should have. As you said, it's in business, sometimes you need to, let's just say pivot, right? That's better than quitting.
Correct.
And just certain things in life too, you need to go to another chapter or whatever it was, but I was so driven by that. And I have no problem scaring people with saying that things are hard, because they are.
Yes.
And you have to learn how to be happy even when things are hard, because the things that are hard aren't hard for as long as you think they are.
That's right.
So, and hard times never last, and they never last as long as you think they do. They'll last in your mind as long as you want them to last. But the actual physicality of whatever that hard time is way shorter. So I think we live in between hards, so so this is hard, and here it's not. It's cool. You push like a motherfucker when it's cool. You push as hard as you can, so when that next hard thing comes, you can knock it a little bit.
It changes your frame of reference.
Become calloused, right?
You do,
right?
And you need that. You become physically calloused, emotionally and mentally calloused, and then you realize, oh, that hard shit
makes you stronger.
Yep, and it prepared me for this next thing.
Yeah. So say Andre, like making fun of you or whatever, he's trying to teach you how to row. And, you sitting there being all depressed and crying and all that other kind of stuff. You wouldn't do that now. You wouldn't do that 5 years from then. You've already done that. You already learned from that.
I did.
Right? Now, if that's protected and shielded, and, if we do with our kids, we try to protect them from all that, then it won't happen when they're 10, 11. It's going to happen when they're 18. Then they're immature as fuck, and they don't know how to push through adversity.
It is what we're doing. If you look at, I'm a full-time strength coach in a public school. That, I always say, is like the downfall of schools, and even, just things in general, is we're always trying to help somebody avoid the hard. And like going back to what, I was with Jim yesterday. His son is wrestling, and he's like, man, this shit's fucking hard to watch. So I'm like, listen, here, I'm going to tell you something. Like, your son's training with you. It's going to take a little bit of time, but once he learns wrestling and it's blended with strength training, there's a lot of kids who aren't strength training. I was like, he is going to crush it. And I am grateful. They say, like, don't thank the sport, thank your coach. I'm still regularly in touch with my one of my coaches. He was the assistant. He was in college. We were not ready for what they were teaching us. They were showing us plyometrics, the intensity and the work ethic. But I'm always grateful for how tough they made me, because I remember times feeling like, man, I better slow down. And right at that moment, Scott walks by and's like, that's a great pace, Zach, keep going. And I was like, I guess I'm not slowing down, because I wanted to make him proud. Mm-hmm. And so this whole work ethic thing, and kind of like that earning respect, I think that's also what work ethic taught us so much. And in my high school years, I came across it was a VHS. It was called Competitor Supreme by Dan Gable. The whole theme of it was, first, Iowa was dominating wrestling. Like, they won like 11 national titles in a row. He's like, you have to outwork the competition all the time. So the day after he won his Olympic gold medal, he was out running the next day. So I'm like, I got to outwork everybody. Work. So work is still like so ingrained in me. But in schools now, we want to have an adjustment for you, Dave, another one for me, another one for this person. If this person doesn't want to do it now, they could do it 3 weeks from now. There's no, like, your back is not against the wall in anything. So you never feel a threat to push you, to make you better. Hey, you don't want to do this. We will give you, there's like 70 options. In life, sometimes we don't have any option. And the only option is fucking go through it.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder, though, if that, follow me for a minute, if that really matters, right? Because I think back to when I was going through school, not everybody worked hard. Only a very few actually worked hard.
In athletics or
in athletics or academics or anything. There was still just the top 10%. Right now, and I worked hard in athletics. I didn't work hard in school, academics, right? But I think that, so if the majority was still not working hard, not applying themselves to the level that they would apply themselves to, that's the same now, right? It is.
You're right. It's a lot of people who are just doing enough, but I still feel the power of somebody pushing you, and challenging you, versus saying, hey, I got an option for you. I got an idea for you. I could give you these other options. And when you have that person that's pushing you, you start learning like, oh, I am capable of this next level. And I think that builds you internally.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Well, I
talk
believe
about
so.
it all
Yeah.
the time. The training, you know, people might think, oh, you guys do it because you want to be jacked. Nah, man. We do it because without this, like, I don't even know. I don't think I would be here because
Yeah.
the training does something for my
Yeah, well, it
mind.
definitely does. It still comes down to the individual to make a decision on how they're going to interpret a message.
Yes.
Right. Because somebody could, tell somebody at a young age, you can't do this. And one person may believe it. The other person may say, fuck you, I can't.
Yeah.
Right. So who has control over that? That goes back to that
Your
individual.
environment, I think the regularity of what's in your environment. So on a basic level,
Yeah.
I used to hear stories like this. Hey, why is all the Pennsylvania wrestlers beating New Jersey? They're like, because the kids are, they're around their parents who are working on farms, and there's a climbing rope in every garage of every wrestler. So you're surrounded by it. You're surrounded by, that's your normal. Work hard, be strong. So the regularity of things. So if I'm around people that are always kind of like succeeding and winning, you just think these are like normal things that you can achieve. But if you only get a little piece of it here, this person pushes you here, then somebody, you need this like consistent environment. And it's like, it's like training. You go back to your early days of Westside Barbell, everyone was competitive. So you just thought, hey man, this is.
But it's a choice who you surround yourself with.
But
right?
sometimes you don't know where to go to find that stuff. So it's like I think there's a bit of luck in life of like somebody dropping you off at the right place, meeting, maybe, if I would have met Andre 2 years later, I wouldn't have cried and he would have taught me weightlifting and blah, blah, blah. But, I use the past as like, it's a brick that built something for me today. So it's over and I'm going to learn from it.
Yeah.
But why? Because being in so many gyms, I learn to learn from experiences. So your environment, as you know,
It's huge.
I don't even know if I want to say it's everything, but
It's pretty big, man.
you have like pieces, right? You have the family, then you have the school. So what is the message that you're consistently across? So in wrestling, that message to me was hard work. I watched Competitor Supreme VHS tape like every day for a gazillion days. Outwork everybody. And then going back to what you said about people kind of like paying attention to you, a compliment would be given to me in a gym. Like, I see you working, kid. I like what I see. So what did that tell me to do? Work fucking harder.
Yeah.
I will earn the respect of everybody, of more people. And then I also learned that people started respecting me. People didn't pay attention to me when I weighed 130 pounds. When I weighed 145 pounds, some people started learning my name. When I got to 175, more people learned my name. Then when I got near 200 pounds and I'm starting to like do rowing with the whole cable stack, now a lot of people start knowing my name. And I started learning, oh man, like I'm earning the respect of others. But I didn't grasp till these later years that, what did Louis always say, the most important respect is self-respect. And that's where you go kind of deeper with things.
Well, the environment, it's using our backgrounds again as the example. My environment was the people I was around, that knew their shit, to be able to do that. You didn't have that, but you were reading it. Right. So the environment just isn't the people around you. It's the content that you're absorbing. It's the books that you're reading. It's the educational materials. So even if somebody is in a polluted environment, it's not great, right? It's not the best thing in the whole world. But if they're being exposed to content, and they could have role models that they've never met, so it's a movie character or whatever character in a book, content that they're consuming, whatever it is. Now there's a whole nother rabbit hole there. If the content's all shit, well then that's just reinforcing the shit environment. It's just making it even worse. But if the passion is there, you'll seek and find the environment that you need to be able to grow. And that's personal accountability and responsibility. That I believe is probably taught to us well before we even hit our teens.
Oh yeah, I'm like thinking of like you're talking about the gyms you went to on each hand. When I think guys like us, we graduate high school, we're 17, maybe 18. Today kids graduate high school at 19. Okay, some of them 18. You have a different like mindset when you're 19 compared to 17. I graduated high school, I'm 17. The next year I'm in college, freshman year. I'm still kind of like battling that, like I lost so much in wrestling, yet worked so hard. It was weighing on me. And then after 4 years, now I have this winter of not wrestling. So I was going back to the high school to wrestle. And I was like revenging people.
Mm-hmm.
I still was struggling. And you mentioned the environment. That next summer, so I had turned 18 my freshman year in college. We go to Israel. I hadn't been to Israel since my sophomore year, so it's like 4 years later. One of my friends in Israel says, Zach, like, you walk around, you walk around like a zombie. You walk around like we're at a funeral. He's like, that you can't be successful in life that way. He's like, you can't do it. He's like, you got to wake up in the morning and be like, yeah, man, what's today going to bring me? Only great things. And I thought it was like, kind of like hitting me in an interesting way. I was like, man, 6 months I'm walking around. I feel like my head's up my ass. I haven't built any muscle. I still weigh 185 pounds. I'm training hard, eating good. I'm not getting better. And I started like, when he said it to me, I was pissed off at myself. I'm like, those past 6 months, I'm like, he said, you're walking around like a zombie. The way I equated it was the way he said it in Hebrew was like, you're dead, you're alive, but you're not living. You're walking around like a dead man. While there was a new gym that opened up. It wasn't a gym. It was like a very small store. And my older brother was in the Israeli army, and he was telling me that every other weekend he comes home and he trains with the gym owner and this guy, Joe. The gym owner was like a former like PT instructor in the Israeli army, and this guy, Joe, is trying to be a Navy SEAL from America, comes to Israel. So I got talking about like, it just gave me this memory of like being around the right people. My friend Amir tells me like, yo, wake the fuck up, man. Stop walking around like a zombie. I go to this little gym. I mean, so small, maybe 800, 900 square feet, if that. And as I walk down the stairs, I see a poster for the Mr. Israel bodybuilding show. Ever since age 13 and a half, I'm consumed with bodybuilding. And then here I am. I'm like, I'll go watch. Avner sees me one night lifting. And he's like, how old are you? 18. He's like, you're 18. You should do this bodybuilding show. And I'm like, I don't really know. I'm not ready, blah, blah, blah. He's like, all right, whatever. Your brother comes here. You want to come here. He doesn't like give me the really much like push. The next day or 2 days later, I go to the gym during the morning. It may have been a Saturday. I see Joe in there training. And he's benching 2 plates and a 35. Okay. I always remember because I'm not a fan of 35. So I remember that 35. And he's benching and somebody spots him and like touches the bar too early. And he gets up and he's like, I told you not to help me. He's like, I don't even want this much help. And I introduced myself to him. I trained with him. I trained with Avner. And that guy, my friend Amir's like, you're mentioning environment. I got into this environment for like 3 weeks, but that moment and that environment changed my life because everybody was saying, "You go for it." Believe in yourself. I never believed in myself. Amir was basically saying, you need to just give yourself permission to believe. It's no more complicated than that. You need to fucking draw a line in the sand and step over that line. That's what he was telling me. And that experience with those guys, training with them, being around people that were like, hey, walking around depressed is not cool. It ain't normal. There's nothing good about it. End that shit. And so for a few days, a week, Avner every day is like, do you want to compete in the bodybuilding show? No. I keep telling him no. I discuss with my parents. I discuss with my grandparents. I discuss with my brother. And Avner finally gives me an ultimatum. He's like, I'm not asking you again. tomorrow is your last chance. I ask you if you want to do this bodybuilding show. If you say no, I'm not asking you again. So I go home, and I would like run to the gym. It was probably like 1.5 miles. And it was like, kind of like, I could hear myself think. And I'm like visualizing Arnold in his education of a bodybuilder, like going to another country to compete. And I go home and I tell my parents, after Amir telling me to pull my head out of my ass, and Avner being like, yo, man, make a decision. You figure it out. If you want to do this, let's friggin' make a decision. I shouldn't have to try to convince you. So I'm like, if I do this bodybuilding show, it's in 2 weeks. I need 6 meals a day. You know, I'm copying the body. I need 6 meals a day. I need to go to the beach. I need to tan. I need to do. I'm like, I will not say yes if I can't have chicken and rice all day plus eggs for breakfast. So they're like, yes, you could do it. They're like, yes, we'll do it. So we go to the beach the next day, and Avner's gym's going to close at like 9. And my uncle says something to the guy that you rent chairs from. He's like, hey, this is my nephew. My nephew's going to enter a bodybuilding show. And there's not a lot of bodybuilders. This is 1994 in Israel. Bodybuilding, like people thought like I was like a superhero, yet I weigh like 190 pounds. He's like, really? If he wins that bodybuilding show, I'll give you chairs for free. So then my uncle's like, Zach, you better win this bodybuilding show. So now I got people saying, believe in yourself. I got people saying, hey, get your head out of your ass. I'm telling you now, you want to do this? Like, you talk about being a bodybuilder, be a bodybuilder. Then I got Crazy Joe, who's training to be a Navy SEAL, who trained with me. That environment for those 3 weeks completely transformed me. The next, after the beach, I go to the gym. There's nobody in the gym. Avner, I go down the stairs. Avner's like sitting on a bench just waiting to close the gym at 9 at night. And he's like, says in Hebrew, he's like, yes or no? And I'm like, yes. He's like, we start training now. And it was like Rocky 3 where like, you know, Adrian tells like Rocky, she's like, I want you to win. It was like fucking training for war. I would train in the morning. I would come back and train at night. I would run to the gym. I'd practice posing. I was like fully immersed in it. And I learned, I think I created like an alter ego, but it took enough pain and finally being in a consistent environment of positive people and tough people kind of putting me together. And that bodybuilding show and that experience, it changed me, because I remember when I came back home to America, in 2 weeks, I went from 185 to 197. And I always look back and say, nothing changed in my training or my nutrition. The only thing that changed was my mind.
Yeah. The show didn't change you, he did. And I think that's what we need to remember as coaches, mentors, and humans.
It's the people that change you, not the thing or the sport.
It was only one question. It was only one statement that he said at one specific time that had an impact and changed your entire life, right?
Yes or no. And Amir saying, dude, give yourself permission to be happy and to just be like. Yeah.
Well, we all have that, right? So we all have people that we speak to, communicate with, that the opportunity is always there.
Yes.
That we don't know if it's positive or negative, but we can do our best, you know, to try to make it always positive.
Today, now it's this, Dave. Like you said, your environment is everything you take in.
Yeah.
The movies you watch, the podcasts you consume, you just said it, the books you read. If you feed yourself powerful stuff, it could change somebody's life.
Yeah. And if all you feed is negative, it's going to be bad.
That person will always be negative, unless, I don't want to say always, right? I don't like to operate in extremes, right? But it's going to be a hell of a battle to get out of that environment if you've been feeding it to your brain for years.
Yeah. I mean, you've done a lot of mentorship in the business sector, to where with your background that we're talking about, working really, really hard, but not seeing a positive yield from that. That is a huge lesson to learn at a young age, right? Because albeit business or anything else, hard work, even the right hard work, doesn't guarantee that there's going to be an outcome that you want. You have to find satisfaction in that hard work and trust, you know, that it's going to work out. But sometimes it's not what you think. So you should never fucking feel entitled just because you worked hard, because there's no guarantee. The guarantee and the fulfillment is in the hard work, and people get that all mixed up.
And there's of course, we're talking about the lessons we learn through the hard work, but a lot of people are attached to the result and not the journey that built them and calloused them and molded them into that. And to this day, like, sometimes, with business, that is very frustrating. You work so hard, you put this thing together, people said they wanted it, you create it, you put it out there, and then you're like, well, where is the people that said they were going to do this thing? Fucks with your head a little bit. I just had this conversation. I mentioned my buddy Joe from Varsity House. He's like, Zach, I could help you with the business. He's like, but you got to handle the head shit. And I like that, because I think a real friend is not going to try to, bullshit you and protect you. A real friend sometimes needs to drag you into the fire and feed you to the fucking wolves to force you to fight and figure things out. And that's what happened when I was in Israel. That was a life-changing experience for me. And it took a lot of fire and pain leading up to it. So the timing, was correct. But I feel like as men and women, but, man to man here and men listening, we need those tough times. Like I go back to it. Like I tell kids, you're training for your sport. There's a different kind of training going on when somebody's saying they're going to kick your fucking ass. I remember a kid telling me, like, he was like, I'll fucking see you at that football game. And I remember being at the gym being like, all right, if you get 3 more reps, you'll win this fight. Like that's a different training than if I'm training for sport. And so I always say to kids, when's the last time you got punched in the face? When's the last time somebody said, give me your lunch money? When's the last time somebody said, I'll see you after school? I don't know. Maybe it's happening in some of obviously the inner cities, where kids are, hey, I'm walking home from school and I could get shot, if you're in Camden or whatever's going on in those places outside of DC. But that kind of training inspires you because you're training out of like a fear. When things are so perfect, what lessons do we learn?
What motivated you to begin coaching people?
What happened was my freshman year in college, not wrestling, I started showing up at the high school, and the recreation program would come in after high school wrestling practice. So one day I was there, and the guy Brian, the coach, and I remember Brian had like these fucking big arms, and he's like, Zach, why don't you stay after and help, just help coach. And I wasn't like ultra into it. I was coaching. I think it was like, felt good to be able to demonstrate and show that you had prowess. I also put on a lot of muscle. I remember my coach seeing me with a tank top, and he had this like piercing voice, Coach Pagash. He's like, Zach, you look like a fucking beast, and I remember that. So I wanted to like make people proud. And then I wanted, hanging around, doing a little bit of extra got me into the coaching. And then the next year, my younger brother's friend, his dad coached the rec program, took it over. And he's like, Zach, could use you here as a coach. And so I coached the 6th grade and under wrestling team, and I did a really good job. And then I also, being a health and phys ed teacher, you need those volunteer hours. So it's kind of like something I had to do. But I became really good at coaching kids and connecting with them. And I wanted to share my mindset mistakes, but not like in some woo-woo way. I really emphasized like hard work and be tough, get tough. That's what coaches said to you. Hey, get tough. There was no depth to it. So I tried teaching it. I also, even in high school, my classmates would ask me to meet them at the gym, write me a workout. And just like you, in school, I did a good job because I wasn't in high-level classes. So while math class is going on, I'm writing a baseball workout for, Tommy. I'm writing a football workout for Johnny. So I was kind of getting into it. And my maybe I was the junior year in college. I got my first fitness trainer job at a hospital fitness center. My mom worked at the hospital. She worked as a nurse, and they had a fitness center. And she asked the fitness center director if they needed help. And I remember filling out an application and calling like every other week, every 3 weeks. And I remember it was Dr. Pete. Dr. Pete, I think he had a PhD in psychology. They were always waiting on like human resources and this and that. And nobody was calling me. I was following up with him. Finally, like 6 months after putting in an application, they hire me. And I worked at a hospital fitness center and got to work with a lot of unique personalities, so to speak. I'm not training athletes right away. I'm training adults, a lot of employees of the hospital, nurses, the CFO, the COO, the guy in charge of the radiology department. If I worked weekends, you'd have like neurosurgeons coming in, and you build relationships and learn to talk with them. And I'm taking people's blood pressure. One guy I became really close with was a Vietnam vet, and I remember showing him drop sets. And when I showed him how to do drop sets, he was like this. He loved it. Any intensity technique I could show him, then we would start training together. And I really loved working there. And I remember thinking to myself, I think I want to work in a hospital when I grow up. By the way, that's like mid-90s, great people. Now forget it. Obviously, would never do that. But I loved being around the different people. And there were such different personalities. Like somebody always wanted to be on that treadmill, and he needed his blood pressure taken right when he came in, and he only would talk about like certain things. So I learned to work with people. And that first summer working there, a dad brought in his son, who was a high school wrestler. And, he was a unique kid because I knew deadlift, barbell row, squat bench, all that stuff. I took him through basic strength training, but he moved perfectly. I remember showing him how to do a conventional. I didn't know a sumo deadlift. It's 1996. I show him. He does it. And I don't even know what rep ranges I was doing. His name was Lucas Ott. I still remember. He was like one of 15 or 16 kids. I would take him through workouts twice a week. I think it was something like $15 a month membership. People were like, hey, Zach, be my trainer. I'm like, just come when I'm on. Don't pay me. I'll do I'll do everything for free, blah, blah, blah. That kid went on to qualify for the States. That was like my first inkling of basic strength training. He would do pull-ups, dips, dumbbell bench, bar, all basic stuff. I got him better. But I didn't want to get into the strength and conditioning stuff until I tore my ACL. Because when I had torn my ACL, I was a strong guy. I had, I wasn't a power lifter, by the way. I was a competitive teenage bodybuilder, but training out of Diamond Gym. And I know I'm jumping around. It's my ADD, but the stories are kind of coming back. I was like 228, 230. I must have looked big. People always thought I was like 270. But I had broken my nose. I had torn my shoulder. I had a meniscus surgery early in college because I was wrestling all the time, going back to the high school. But after the ACL is when I said, I'm going to learn. I started learning what a strength coach was, but that's when I said, I'm going to learn this and make sure no other kid goes through all my mistakes. Because leading up to that, how strong was I doing bodybuilding training? I had squatted 545 for triple. I had like good strength endurance. Like I squatted 225 for 50 reps, 315 for 22 reps. So I was confused. It pissed me off. How am I this big, this strong? And I tore my ACL in those early days. If you remember, Dave, MMA was not called MMA. It was called NHB, no holds barred fighting. So I found a place in Elizabeth, which is outside of Newark, that taught something called shoot fighting, which was, I think, began in Japan. So it's like open palm, like Boss Rutan used to do that stuff. So they were teaching shoot fighting and jiu-jitsu. I had been coaching wrestling at the Rec. I was coaching wrestling in middle school. I would go to the high school. I would like kill anybody because I was fucking strong. Or so I thought I was strong. And then all of a sudden these, MMA or NHB is a thing. And I'm like, I'm going to redeem all my losses because now I had a very I remember I started having a confidence it was real interesting, that I believed in myself. And I was like ready to like fight the devil. I had this like confidence. So I started training in the shoot fighting, and they called it grappling. They didn't call it jujitsu. And I entered a tournament after like 2 weeks of training in that. And I remember losing in overtime to a judo black belt. And I thought I had won, but I just didn't know the rules. And I was so pissed off. And I was like, if in 2 weeks I can, battle against a black belt, then I think I can start like competing on a national level. So I was on this like redemption. So I go back to outwork everybody. So we're going to train on a Saturday morning at, let's say, 10 a.m. I get there at 8:30. They had some dumbbells. They had a chin and dip bar. They had heavy bags. So I get there and I do my outwork everybody thing. I'm squatting the heavy bag. I'm running with it. I'm doing dumbbell snatch. I'm walking lunges. I'm just destroying myself because I'm training before we're going to train, right? I'm going to outwork everybody. We start warming up. One of the guys goes to try to back trip me. He ever so slightly hits my heel, like with a heel trip, and I hear it go like, and I didn't have the education. I thought I tore my hamstring when that pop happened. I get the MRI. I find out it's my ACL. Now I got to get my ACL repaired. And that's when I was like, man, I broke my nose. I remember when I broke my nose, it was like under my eye. Like I broke my nose. I've torn my shoulder. I already had a knee surgery. I'm getting another surgery. I'm 26. I could squat over 500 pounds. I'm so strong. I have to find a way to take my mistakes and help somebody else. I had no clue I thought it was just going to be a part-time side gig thing. But that obsession with strength, I start researching the Russian wrestling training, come across Elite FTS, and then it was like the crazy rabbit hole that I went down. And what's so funny is like, talk about like the coaching jobs. As a teacher, you got the summers off. It's so funny. I remember the story. You have the summers off, and I didn't do a great job of saving my money. And I'm like, man, I need to get a job. And I've got a master's degree in health education. My resume says like undergrad, master's degree, Mr. Israel, Mr. Israel on my resume. I had trained at Diamond Gym. I won the Mid-Atlantic Natural. And the same night I took second in the men's novice. A week later, I took second in the teenage in New Jersey. So those are on my resume. How funny is that? So there's no gyms. There's like big health clubs. But there's this one place called Spa Lady. So I'm like, I got to get a fucking job. I'll train anybody. So I go to Spa Lady. That's the only place I really hear about that wants trainers. I go in. The drive there is already like breaking my heart. I'm like, I can't be training people at Spa Lady. Then I'm like, I need money. And I need to become a personal trainer. I didn't hear of the word strength and conditioning coach yet. So I fill out the application, and I drop the application off. I speak to the manager for a short amount of time. And then in between that is when I think I come across Elite FTS, and I start reading about strength coaches, that there's a thing. And I start thinking to myself, well, maybe I train some local wrestlers out of my parents' garage and backyard. I'm like, how do I train them? I'm like, I'll train them like old school bodybuilding, Diamond Gym. I'll copy Rocky 3 and Rocky 4. We'll lift stones. We'll sprint the hill in the woods. I'll go to the playground because I saw a documentary on inmates at a California prison, like pressing picnic tables. So I'm like, we'll press picnic tables. And I start kind of like mapping out. And you're like, oh, I need a business plan. So I'm like, okay, the local gym, it's $5 a day for a guest pass. I'll train kids for $5 per session. And so I'm like, I can't train at this Spa Lady. It's like wearing on me. Yeah. Nobody calls me 2 days, 3 days. I'm like, thank God. Maybe I'm just in the bottom of the resume pile. They don't want Mr. Israel, right?
Yeah.
4 days later, 5 days later, I get a phone call, and I remember answering. Remember the little Nokia phone?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I'm like, fuck, they're calling me. And I'm like, I'm going to lie. And I feel really bad that I'm going to lie. I feel bad that I'm lying. The lady calls me and she's like, Zach, I can't remember her name. She's like, I've already got you some clients. And I'm like, you guys didn't call me. So I thought you weren't going to hire me. So I took a job working at Bally's. And I think maybe it was still called Jack LaLanne. So I lied. And I still have that feeling in my gut. I feel bad that I lied. And I remember I was at the beach walking on the boardwalk. And I'm like, I just said no to the place that was going to pay me, because I started having this gut feeling of, I am so done doing shit I don't want to do. I'm not going to work with people I don't want to work with. I'm going to train people out of the garage in the backyard. So one day I go to Apollon Gym to get a protein shake. I see one of the kids I coached in middle school working out. He's got gloves on and he's doing tricep push downs. His dad comes in to pick him up. I'm like, listen, he's training wrong. I used to do that. You can't win that way. His son was a county champ as a freshman, was a talented kid. I'm like, I'm starting a business. And it's out of my garage. But I'm like, I got all the stuff. I had a physio ball, because you remember the functional training? I had a balance board. I had a pair of 50 and 100-pound dumbbells that I bought from Newark. And I had a flat utility bench. And if I wanted to incline it, I propped it up on a toolbox. So I was like, I could train him. And I'm waiting for the price. And I'm just like, it's the same price as here. It's $5 in a session. It's like, all right. He's like, I think we could swing that for 3 days a week. I'm like, all right, let's do it. We map out when he's going to come in the summertime. I had just gotten the ACL surgery, so I'm hobbling around. So I'm training him. I do chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs. But instead of a normal chest and back workout, when he's doing back, he's in my backyard doing pull-ups off a tree branch. For bent over rows, he's doing bent over rows with a stone. For legs, I ride my bike as rehab, and he jogs next to me as I ride my bike to the park. We go to the park. I make him military press the picnic table. I make him do lunges, split squats with the back foot on the picnic table. I remember he picks up a stone. He's like, there's a worm on it. I'm like, fuck that worm. Eat that worm. Yeah. And that began. So I train him. Then they want his brother to train. Then there's a kid in the neighborhood whose dad owns a pickup truck, and I see in the newspaper classified ads that there's gym equipment for sale from a Gold's Gym that moved. So I tell this kid, Kurt, I go, Kurt, if you could borrow your dad's truck and come with me to buy all these plates and this pull-up bar, chin dip bar, I'll train you for free all summer. I'll prepare you for basketball. So we drive to this place in Princeton, and it's a guy's house where they're storing it, except it's not a house. It reminds me of coming here. Go down a gravel road. He's got a big barn, and he's got a big house. He's got like a little pond. There's animals running wild, and I see the barn, and the weights are in the barn. It's all these Ivanko plates loaded against the wall. He's got like an old Mustang chin and dip bar, just extra equipment that Gold's Gym was getting rid of. I buy 20 plates of everything, 20 45s, 20 35s, 20. I don't know who the fuck I was training with all these weights, but I bought all those weights. I bought the chin and dip bar, and seeing his barn with some weights, I was like, I want a barn. So I trained that kid, Kurt. I'm training him out of the house. I'm training those two wrestling brothers, and I'm training them until it gets really cold, summer until winter. The garage is colder than the outside. So that puts the kibosh on training people. I'm immersed in your website, like going through everything. And then, do you remember Ryan Lee coming out with the business stuff? Then I immerse myself in all his business stuff. I learned to build my own website. He had a program that spoke about not burning out as a personal trainer. Train people for 4 hours a day, then your other 4 hours a day, the stuff you do in person, create as like an ebook. So I created an ebook. I took pictures of training kids. Back then, remember the camera? You could take like 8 photos before it was full. Then you had to like plug it in. I didn't know how to adjust the size of stuff. So I just started documenting everything we did, I don't think I started writing for you guys when I was out of my parents' garage, but once I started getting things going in the first house we bought was that following summer. We had to gut the whole house, but my wife's uncles, they're not contractors, but they knew how to do everything. They basically were our contractors. They redid the garage for me, 2-car garage. When we were house hunting, I was like, I need a 2-car garage, because I knew, just like you told me, like I knew Zach there was no stopping me by this point. I was on such a mission. I thought I was going to cure the world with what I was doing. Literally, I was like, I will save every wrestler. There will never be a wrestler getting a knee surgery, a broken nose, a torn shoulder. So that 2-car garage, they sheetrocked it. We painted it. I put old photos of like Arnold and Franco and Dave Draper and Iron Mind photos. And then I bought used dumbbells from places that thought it was like junk. I was buying it for 15 cents a pound.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I pieced together what looked like a personal training studio, and I started writing for USA Wrestler, would send a physical newsletter. Except it was unique shit. I was doing stuff that I had read or heard about by reading. I think Dr. Ken had written articles. So I must have read Dr. Ken pushing cars. We start pushing trucks. I take pictures of it. Flipping tires. Murph was doing that shit in the late 90s. I purchased a DVD from you guys that he had, like the Sven Carlson, the World's Strong. Anything I could learn from, I purchased it, and then I learned and I applied. So I took photos of all that stuff, and they would send it out to wrestlers all around the country. Anybody who had a USA Wrestling card got the physical. It goes to show you that even paper was cheap back then. Now you want to like make a book, it's like 20 cents a page. So I just went with the outwork everybody in business. And coming to the house, I had kids from an hour away, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes away. We had kids from Pennsylvania coming to New Jersey to train out of the house. I would train in the house for 20 minutes, the backyard, and then we would go down the street. The first sled I bought was from Louis. He sent me a sled with an open book of stamps, like clear tape.
Oh, yeah, I know. The strap was taped to the...
That's right.
Yeah.
So nobody had seen sleds pushing trucks. I don't want to say nobody, but this community of athletes. And so I would come home from school and I would train people at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in my garage and outside. And those kids really became dominant in any sport. We had a lot of wrestlers, football, baseball. I don't think I had any like lacrosse, no soccer. It was just like those 3 sports. And kind of like what you said earlier was like, when you were at Westside, you had nowhere to go. Where was anybody going to go for strength and conditioning? You had Joe DeFranco way up north. Jason was doing like a hybrid of athletes and professionals. I think Dwayne Carlisle was down in like Philly, but he was like a speed guy, where I was a more like, kill or be killed.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I'm going to train you. So it attracted wrestlers. And what's interesting too, Dave, is like my prices were more expensive then, as uneducated as I was, compared to now. Because why? Competition, and people look at the prices. But coaching for me, I think, was an accident. Like, I was there one day in wrestling. They're like, just stay. Kids in the school saying, hey, help me out. Adults at the hospital fitness center saying, hey, I'm going to bring my son, show him some exercises. Then Lucas goes to be a state place winner. As a wrestler, the goal to go to states was like, I trained this kid a little bit. He places in states. It starts registering with me. Like, I could do this. If I could train somebody, I could make them a winner. And it's like, I started thinking maybe that's what God, I think Alan told me, Alan or Ryan, I think Ryan Lee said to me, he goes, I think God put you on this earth to make people strong. That's what he said to me. And I remember it, and I was like, you were like, every time I talk to you, Zach, you're fucking talking about owning a gym, training people in a gym. You're like, you're going to open a gym. And I guess that's was my environment. I wasn't around you in person, but I was immersed with you. And Alan, as you know, remember when he had cancer, he mentored me in business through AOL Instant Messenger.
Yep.
In the summertime, I've got all this free time. I didn't know Alan is going through chemo. He doesn't say a word. I think I printed, I still have them. I printed them out, the Instant Messenger. How do you rent? How do you get rent somewhere? How do you negotiate rent? What should my prices be? What time should I open up? How do I do a trial? Do I give them a week for free, a one-time? All this stuff. Then he must have made a public announcement that he's battling cancer.
Yeah.
He's stage 4 cancer. And it's like, I'm like, oh my God, I've been taking all your time. You're going through chemo. You don't tell me that stuff. So it's like, when I open my gym, I'm going to pay you for all your time. I'm going to pay you back. He goes, you don't pay me back. You're going to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember you did Lift Strong, the shirts, and then the ebook? I said, as soon as I can open my first gym, I'm going to do a fundraiser. I opened the first warehouse location in the spring of 2007. It was June 1st. And we did a fundraiser in-house, Lift Strong, 2 or 3 weeks later. There was like a dozen. I had 12, 14 members. You know, I had enough members to double my rent. I've done that fundraiser every year except for 1 year during COVID. We just did one less than a month ago. Every year, it goes to a cancer foundation and a military foundation. So I still do it.
Yeah, I think a big part of your story is the bootstrapping.
Yes.
Right. So you knew you were going to train kids, you know, and that's what you wanted to do, and you just had to figure it out. Where I think that's to me, it's a big thing. Like, people just need to figure shit out. They don't need to really know exactly what they're doing, but they need to figure it out and start, right? Because if you start, like, you talk to the one kid, then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, I have to train him with what I have.
Yes.
But you started. You know, the biggest obstacle for a lot of people is just starting.
They wait for perfect. And
Yes.
there's obviously no such thing as perfect. And it's really interesting to see gym owners. And we saw that kind of like when CrossFit started, it was 1,000 square feet, 500 square feet. Then some dude opens up a 2,500 square foot facility. You're like, oh my God. Then somebody goes 5,000 square feet. Then first time gym owners have 10,000 square feet, 20. And I was like, that didn't connect with me because, first of all, the money thing was on my mind. I was afraid. I was always afraid that it wouldn't work. And I think that's what, I don't want to say inspired, it pushed me to work.
I don't think that ever goes away, though, for a lot of entrepreneurs. It's paranoia all the time. That's what drives.
Especially now. Things change all the effing time. And so I wanted to go small. And I also, as much as Rocky was a movie, I didn't think it was fiction. I believed that the mindset, that the training, that was what was going to work. The tough gym. I almost called the gym Tough Gym because I kept imagining when Apollo took Rocky back to Tough Gym. And ironically, to this day, I sometimes think underground strength gym is like too scary for people. Like I tell people, I go, if I called it Underground Speed Club, we'd have 500 members because people still think strength is like makes you slow. It's a bad thing. But the ability for, if you can start without perfect, and that I call it FIO, figure it out. I believe in that with training. You know, now being at the high school, I got to that weight room. I actually posted like the first day of being at that high school. It looked like a tornado went through the place. It was so bad. I was like, man, I've trained people with nothing. I've trained people with shit, but I don't know if I could train kids in this place. It was such a dump. And with the large numbers of kids, I got to a point where I said, you know what? Kids are going to have to actually figure things out here. I'm going to coach them, but I can't coach everybody. So I feel like there's a beauty in figuring it out. Like my son right now, he doesn't always train with me, and I like it because I want him to go to the gym and do shit wrong and miss reps and do too many reps. Like even Matt has those Soviet sport review books out. Of course, I got maybe the gods gave me. I opened one and it went right to a wrestling page, which how crazy is that? So I'm reading it and they're like, like talking about special exercise, it goes jump many times, jump 20 times or more. But now that I'm so smart as a strength coach, sports performance coach, 20 times is too much. Jump more than 5 times and your power output decreases. Don't do it. But here I am reading what Soviets are doing decades ago, and they're saying, yeah, jump a lot more. And I think we may have, the pendulum has swayed so much where everybody's doing stuff so perfectly that they think they can't start unless my gym has software and technology and I've got all the best stuff because I can't train anybody. And then you have kids showing up who can't do a fucking pull-up. And you're like, oh, damn, I actually only need a dumbbell.
Yeah. But all coaches will still say, hey, man, I had this kid come in. He's farm strong. You know, he grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
And he's just stronger than shit.
That's right.
So nobody ever dispels that because it's not a myth.
It's not a myth.
But it has to be perfect to get strong. You see how it contradicts so much?
I was thinking the whole driving here, I knew was going to be like a good for my soul trip because of these farms. It's like a reminder of a place where work lives, simplicity, work, nothing fancy. And, you know, I'll look at even old video, not even old videos, but like Khabib, the MMA fighter, one of the best guys in the world ever. When he's training in Dagestan, does he have a monitor hooked up to his heart rate? Is his coach saying, don't go until 3 minutes because your heart rate will be at 72.5%. And we're trying to make everything so perfect, and I honestly think it removes the grit from stuff. It removes the grit. And that's why, you know, talk about business. Where's the staying power? You want everything to be perfect, and when it's not perfect, you're quitting. Mm-hmm. In business, you know, you've done it longer than me, but we had the recession in 08, 09. In my little town, we had a hurricane. Well, that hurricane kind of hit. Well, yeah. That was like, I felt that recession infinitely more than the 08, 09 recession. Mm-hmm. My gym went to like 50, 60, 70% less during that with all the flooding. Then we got like the COVID shit. Mm-hmm. Well, like, I don't know. I still don't, you know, I'll pivot, but I'm not going to quit. I tell people this, when I burn the gym down is when it's over.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said,
on my terms.
All those big events that you're talking about aren't the ones that are the most, when I think back in the 25 years, and I can think of the big events like that, they weren't the ones that were most traumatic. There were things outside of that were way worse that I had to deal with. So you learn how to, you know,
what kind of
work through. Lawsuits, all kinds of shit. I mean, there's always things like that.
Which causes emotional stress.
Yeah, and not having a diverse amount of vendors, you know. So there's a reason why I have many vendors. There's a reason why I have vendors in so many different states and vendors in different countries. God, did I know? I never predicted like all countries and all states would shut down at one fucking time. But you diversified, you know, because if this person's out, then you have this, and there's always things, you know, websites, where you're online, website crashes, and there's no solution. You're like, fuck, you can either panic and say, we're done.
My website got hacked.
Yeah.
I remember.
See, that's worse than the things you're talking about. They turned it into
a porno website.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I was like, it just got like, the way it grew was like I couldn't access anything. So I just was like Googling like hacking website. People were like, I can't do this. Then I come across a website. I think it was called Hack Repair. I still have the guy does like the hosting. He was out in California. He must have worked through the night. I was back in, but I remember I had to take my daughter to a tennis tournament in Florida. So I'm like, okay, I have to leave my business. I take my laptop with me, but I turned it into a sale. I held a sale on digital books that I would send people manually because my website couldn't do it. But I figured it out. I FIO. And I think like, even looking back to teaching, speaking of mentors, when I was a student teacher in the elementary school, the one teacher, his name was Bill, he goes, Zach, you always want plan B, and even if you don't have plan B, you got plan B. What he was saying is you should always have shit ready to go. Yes. He's like, sometimes we have a plan to do XYZ with the students, and then they show up and tell us the parade is going to come through. He's like, you need plan B always. At all times. And speaking of like work ethic and mentoring and interning, so you have to student teach to become a teacher. You do a full semester, which is 14 or 15 weeks. That's like how you learn. And there was something on Twitter. This is so fucking funny. It was on Twitter like a week ago where I saw Matt Gates from XPE. They're down in Florida. They do all the combine training. And I think last year and the previous year, they keep having the fastest guy in the 40. He's like, call me crazy. I think he's around our age. He's mid-40s. Call me crazy. He's like, but this is the first week for our interns during combine week. And he's like, more than half of them are sick. They got family problems. They can't make it. And the amount of people that defended it were like, yeah, man, what do you want them showing up sick and shutting down your whole place? He's like, listen, we are elite athletes. I don't think a case of the sniffles is going to shut down the whole operation. He's like, I'm not recommending you come in if you're legitimately sick. Then some guy's like, yeah, man. He's like, I'd rather stay home too instead of slaving away for an unpaid internship. And I'm thinking to myself, interning, equating it with slaving. If I lived near you or lived near any of the guys on the Q&A, I offered Jay when he was on the, I don't think he was on the Q&A. I offered to work at his gym for free. Mm-hmm. And I was already a full-time teacher making $45,000 a year. I was going to work for free with a master's degree. I didn't say this is slaving. When I student taught, I didn't know I'm allowed to call out sick. I didn't know. I thought you show up no matter fucking what. And then somebody had a Twitter account said the handle was like, pay the interns. So I was like, okay. So, and look, I paid an intern, not a lot, and I fired him. But here's the thing. I'm teaching you. Shouldn't you pay? Well,
a lot of people I know now.
I'm pouring all of my decades of information into you. Why am I? And look, maybe I will pay you if you could do a great job. At the end of the month, you're kicking ass. I'll pay you. But the guy said slaving. How passionate about you are of strength and conditioning that showing up is considered slaving away. Now I know, like, you can't even get involved on Twitter or any of that. You can't win those arguments. But that's what we're looking at. But if you want to learn, you must immerse yourself like you lived at a gym as a kid.
The better coaches I know that have their own facilities, so not universities, high schools, stuff like that, they charge people for their internships.
I agree.
Right? Because they're giving them 20 years of knowledge in the time that they're there. So they're paying, anywhere between $2,500 and $10,000. I mean, pretty close to what they would pay for a semester in college, because actually what they're learning by interning from them is more than they've learned through their whole career in college.
It's everything
as far as running a business. And they got to that point because of things that you're talking about. They're like, what the fuck? Like, why am I paying this person, $15, $20 an hour as an intern, and they can't pick up the cones, they can't do shit, they bitch and they whine. Fuck them. I want people that want to value
have
what
skin in
I
the
have
game
to offer. So now I think we're getting to this area to where the paid internships are going to be with the shitty coaches that have nothing to teach you, right? And now the ones, if you really want to learn from, you're going to have to pay them, because that's where it's become because of that. And so be it.
Information, I think, because it's so easy to access, people don't value it as they once did. They're like, I'll just Google it. I'll just look it up on YouTube. And you know what? You could become an expert through all those avenues, but you need skin in the game. You need to get entrenched in it. And all my learning is not from strength and conditioning. Like, I utilize bodybuilding methods. I utilize nutrition that guys taught me at Diamond Gym. I utilize information from all the books. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars. Like, your bookshelf is like, I don't know how many feet that goes, Dave. 60 feet long, multiple. I mean, that right there. But we were saying earlier, like, I don't know if people want to read books anymore. They just want to go through the surface. When you intern, if you're paying, you're going to go deep. I had a really good intern come from a college, but he actually sucked so bad at first. Not only did he suck skill-wise, he sucked like in his ability to communicate. He didn't have good social skills. I probably should have. I remember Alan saying this. He's like, I'll hire somebody who's a waiter or waitress or bartender with a good personality, teach them the training before somebody who lacks social skills. Well, he lacked all of it. And being in a beach town, I was ready to say, dude, go bar back at this local bar/restaurant because I need you to like learn to talk with people. But the thing that I liked about him is anytime I told him something, he's like, that's a good point. I'm going to do that next time. He didn't argue and come back with an answer or a defense as to why he made a mistake. And look, it's okay to make the mistake. That's why you're here to learn. But he didn't defend the mistake. If he needed to learn something, he came in and practiced it. So I said, a very important part of this program is I need you to learn this warm-up. So I gave him a membership to the membership site. I said, here's all the warm-ups. You obviously see us doing the warm-up. He'd come in the morning, write the warm-up on the board, and then he would do it. And then he knew I lifted at 7:30 a.m. He started lifting with me. And so he would train with me. Then he would stay after and do something he had to learn. He had to learn how to use kettlebells. Here's a video. How did I learn to use kettlebells? I bought a DVD before I even owned kettlebells. And then I used them all effing day. There was kettlebells in the garage, in the backyard. I went, full immersion. I really think if you want to be great at something, you need obsession.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You got to be obsessed. Some people, if they're in the right place, lots of money, lots of people, a little bit lucky, you could be good and be very successful in the business just because of the number of people that are there. But that doesn't always happen. It's that.
They're still going to get kicked in the nuts at some point.
No doubt.
So they can get to a high level faster because of that. But I'll equate it to some of the lifters that I've trained with, just to change the context a little bit, where I've known lifters that have learned how to train through and around nicks, injuries and stuff like that for a long time. I've known other ones that just come to the top really fast. No injuries, nothing. I mean, just boom. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Right there. Then bam, one injury, they're quit. They don't know how to come back from it because they haven't learned how to come back from the strained hamstring, the pulled this, the pulled that. So when that bigger thing happens, it's like, fuck, it's career ending. Where same thing can happen in business. You're around all the right people, then boom, they hit it, they do really well, and then one simple thing, comes around and they don't know how to handle it. They're crushed and now they're out of business.
So they lack strategy, they lack grit, they lack maybe thinking, hey, let me map this out. And you mentioned the injuries. 15 plus years ago when I was training athletes, I didn't have like, his hips are bad, his ankles are bad, he can't. Everybody was like, hey, you're going to do 5 pull-ups right here. You're going to do 10 squats, 10 lunges, 10 push-ups. Okay, boom. I'll go run up the street, run back down. Did it. All of a sudden, through the years with all this specialization, kids are like doing push-ups and one shoulder's up here, one shoulder's down there. I'm like, what the F is this? All right. Now I have to immerse myself in like rehab. What's Kelly Starrett doing? What's Donnie? I got to immerse myself in those things. Years ago, I could teach you how to squat so quickly because kids were showing up physically prepared. I think now it's even more, requires more skill to be a strength coach because kids are so frigged up from all the sports stuff that they do. Or you could be an uneducated coach and not even realize that those knees are caving in. He's half squatting. He's bouncing in the bottom. His chest shouldn't be in that position. His grip is off and you keep letting that grip be off. They're not setting the shoulder. All those little things. Or even speaking of like obsession, I mentioned to you, my son trains at a local gym. They have equipment from a company that's made stuff for decades, but it's unsafe. And I'm thinking to myself, where's the obsession to make this better for somebody's back? And how is this still the same stuff, from before? And that's where I think like, I can't put out crap product, you know, I know that's like how we operate.
Did those injuries change when you were training the kids at the D1 level? Was that still a problem, or is
That's
it better?
an interesting question. So being at the Division I level, I remember the first mistake I made. Should we go into like actually how I got hired at the first
Sure,
place?
why not?
That was an interesting one. So a long time ago, Dave, you were on, you answered somebody's question on the Q&A. And it was a guy starting a private business and trying to train football players, and he couldn't train the football players. And you said, you know what? If I was a strength coach, I would reach out to the football coach and say, hey, I'm training 3 of your guys. I'm training John, Jimmy, and Joey. What would you like me to work on with them to make your job easier? I saw you post that. I took action with that ASAP. I utilized that when I reached out to Coach Buxton when he was at Blair Academy. He was at Blair Academy for about 30 years. They dominated. They always compete very heavily against, there's like some private schools in this area. What's like some Walsh Jesuit or I don't know. They big wrestling schools. That's the last place I'm thinking is going to need help. I use what you said. I said, Coach, I'm reaching out. I do a lot of strength and conditioning for wrestlers. I'm in New Jersey. Let me know if you need help with anything. I'll come up and, share with you any stuff. And if you could send me your address, I'll send you some books. I get an email back like within an hour. He's like, I know exactly who you are. I'm like reminiscing voice. He's like, here's my address. Would love to send you the stuff. I send him my stuff. He calls me while he's on vacation in Rhode Island. And I'm like, oh, you're on vacation. Let's maybe connect when you get back. He's like, nope, now's perfect. He starts talking training. He's like, why do you want to help me? That's where he gets to. I say, I can't stop helping people with this stuff. Like, I want to share this with anybody who's willing to listen. So I go up. He invites me up to train the team. And I take them through basically a kettlebell. I take them through the gymnastics warm-up, like the Russian wrestling warm-up. I take them through kettlebells, all this. I'd go up in the beginning of the school year. I'd go up a little bit before the season, a little bit in the season. Volunteer. I'd go up. It was good for the soul for me. I loved it. He leaves Blair, and now he's at Lehigh. These colleges are starting to create the regional training centers to prepare guys for the Olympics. At Lehigh is his former wrestler who's the head coach. He's like, Zach, I told Pat Santoro, about you, and he wants to learn from you. And one day Pat drives down to my gym, my first gym, with a notepad and paper, asking me how I train wrestlers, taking notes. Here's the sample workouts. Here's what you want to do in season, off season. The next fall, Buxton calls me and says, you want to come up and train some of our guys one day? And I'm like, yeah, train wrestlers, train Division I guys and guys prepping for the Olympics. I'll come up. I go drive to Lehigh. It's just shy of 2 hours from my house. It's a very old, it's beautiful. They bring me in. It's a cathedral ceiling, exposed wooden beams. The whole surrounding the mats were black and white photos of all Americans from 1940s all the way to current day. I just get on the mat, to just become one with the mat. The guys are in the back lacing up shoes, and I see some I'm around impressive people. You could just when you could tell. And I just close my eyes, and I literally could hear the ghosts of the past wrestling, and I could hear whistles blowing and guys coach yelling. I could hear it. The history was blew my mind. I take them through this gymnastics warm-up that I know how to do, plyometric training, jump training, and then Coach Santoro says to me, I'm like, where's the weight room? He's like, I just want to warn you, it's a dump. It's like a dungeon. And he takes me down the stairs. And when he says it's a dump, I'm thinking to myself, sounds like heaven to me.
Yeah.
Beautiful. 750 square feet, if that. 3 half racks shoved into the corners. Dumbbells, thick handle dumbbells up to 200 pounds. Stereo with a CD player. No, I think we plugged in a iPod. And I remember every like 5 minutes I had to push the speakers back onto the table because we were dropping weights. I took them through kind of like what would be like an advanced introductory workout. They had never done Zercher squats before. We're doing dumbbell snatch with a dumbbell clean and press, Zercher squats. They were just like killing it. We were like doing box jumps, but when you would jump on the box, you couldn't stand because your head will go through. So they would like jump and crouch. I just lit that place on fire. And then I'm like, well, you know, it was over. I think I went over some nutrition stuff with the guys, spoke about mindset. Then Coach Santoro was like, man, thanks for coming. He's like, I just want to like take you and show you a little bit of the campus. He's like, you have time? I was like, yeah, I'd love to see this campus. It was like, you know, not a big place. He shows me around, and it wasn't long. It was like 15, 20 minutes. And I was like, well, I had a great time. And, you know, let me know how I could help you. I'd love to help you out. I don't really live obviously close enough, but I'll help you out any way I can. He's like, okay, we need you. That's what he says. I was like, I don't know what to say. You know, I'm like, well, that's what I said. I'm like, I don't really know what to tell you. Like, I don't live anywhere near here. I don't think I could get here. He's like, I wouldn't even need you here every day. He's like, twice a week. He's like, I could get you here. He's like, you just got to let me know like what it would cost to get you here. And that's where I make a mistake. I'm like, well, I'm making money with my gym. I'm making money online. You know, income is so good, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't know, like cover my gas money and enough that's like health insurance type money. So they come up with a number. They're getting a new building through donors. They had like 7 or 8 people donate money, and they get a $25 million building. The building was kind of like not named after the guy, but he was scholared anonymously when he was younger in his 70s and became a national champ. So he made a big donation. So 8 guys donate $3 million each. They got now like a new weight room. It's no longer a dungeon. It's like all perfect, you know, kind of like against everything. But, you know, that fall, I'm driving home from Vermont, and Pat calls me. And he's like, Zach, he's like, we got a new facility. So it's like not even a year later. And we want to bring you on as the strength coach. It would be Monday, Wednesday, 3 hours, da-da-da. And he's like, it's this much money. And I'm like, you know, now I hear the money, and I'm like, I don't even know if that's going to cover gas money. It's 2 hours. It's almost 2 hours away. I'm like, I'm going to drive there 2 hours, coach 3 hours, come back to you. I'm doing it all in my head. I'm like, I can't do that. He's like, you sure? I'm like, I don't think I could do that. So he's like, all right. He's like, all right. So we hang up. I tell my wife. My wife's like, oh my God. She's like, you need to make that happen. My wife kind of like, when you're not an entrepreneur, they like that kind of stability. She's like, it would be great. We'll move there. You could work for the college. But, you know, she's thinking all these things. I like call back Pat. It goes to voicemail. Like not a few minutes later. I'm like, is there any way that there could be other money found? He's like, no, this was the money we went to our donors with. That's the money they offered. I can't go back. So then I just said to myself, you know what? It's kind of like when somebody says you can't do it. I'm like, fuck, is this a challenge now? And maybe this isn't perfect, but this could maybe open up many doors. And what's ironic, though, that's not the first time I trained a Division I team. In 2009, Rutgers was traveling to my gym, wrestling, and I was volunteering. And so I say yes. Then I go get the schedule, and I got to tell you, I was never tired. I was waking up. Can't remember what time. I would leave the house at like 5:30, start coaching at 7:30. I would do a 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, twice a week. I was like, all right, I'm going to the Division I level. I had trained Rutgers guys who were very tough, 09, physical, like we were doing amazing training. I get to Lehigh. I'm thinking my first day we're going to be doing like sumo deadlifts, barbell work. I teach them. I see guys sumo deadlifting. Their backs are like hunching over. You know, John Wellborn always said, he's like, it looks like a dog shitting razor blades. Yeah. I was like, this team, I think at the time was ranked like 12th, 13th in the country. I'm like, what the fuck am I looking at? Is this a bunch of nerds? Like, is this a top 12 team or whatever, you know? So I stop. I'm like, put the barbells back. they were so weak, like structurally in the trunk, in the back, but they were such high-level wrestlers. Everybody in that room was a 2-time state champ, a 4-time All-State, a high school national champ. There were All-Americans in the room. There were All-Americans in the room that couldn't do a sumo deadlift. So I trained them for, I think, like 3 weeks with just dumbbells, kettlebells, calisthenics. After the first day, and me seeing that, I said to Pat, Pat, can I train these guys outside of the weight room for the first 2 weeks? I was like, that place is it's like so perfect. It's so nice. It's air conditioned. The equipment is like so nice. He's like, yeah, what do you want to do? I was like, put me in an open field. Take me to an open field. He's like, all right, on Wednesday, we're going to go to the other side of the mountain. I'm like, mountain? I don't even realize I'm going through mountains. Go to the other side of the mountain. I'll tell them that's where we're going to meet you there. So I train them Mondays, Wednesdays. I'm remembering this. So Wednesday, I'm going to train the whole team. We're not going to do it in 3 groups. We're going to train at 7:30 a.m. We're near like where the football fields are. You see the mountains in the back. You see like the fog. It looked like a scene from like Gladiator. So I take the guys through. I have this kind of like signature where I get them moving. Then I turn it into like some light jump training. Then very explosive work. Then you're doing buddy carries. Then I turned it into like hand fighting and pummeling. I mean, it looked like something just shy of like a street fight. And as it's going on, and there's fog, and these kids had their shirts off, and it's not like it's hot out, right? I remember I got hired kind of like not like the beginning of the season. So we're like looking near like October. You're in Pennsylvania, so it gets cold like Ohio. And I remember saying like, this is exactly where I need to be, like training and building gladiators. And I still remember actually this one kid like just like calmly walked off the field while everybody's like, go in. And I'm like, pummel, hand fight, beat him down, like sprint to that side of the mountain, sprint back. And I see this kid just walk, and I'm thinking to myself, well, we're at Lehigh, we're at like a high academic school, he's probably got to get to class. So I say to the coach, I said, Coach, I saw this one kid walk off. I was like, maybe, does he have an early class? He's like, no, he just quit. I was like, he quit that workout? He's like, yeah, he quit. He quits all the time. I'm like, you could quit here? You could just like leave in the middle? He's like, yeah. That kid was a state champ in Pennsylvania. Super, super talented, but just had this like missing mental link. When things got hard, he just would quit and walk away. I remember one time he was like, we were squatting in the weight room during like the time where they had finals, and he was working with one of the guys on the training. Actually, the 2 guys were on the regional training center. So former national champs prepping for the Olympics. He couldn't use their weight, but he just wouldn't change the weight. And I remember he went down to squat and he got stuck, and he just like put it down, and like he walks away and just stares out the window. They don't say nothing to him. They take the weights off, put it up. And I was like, man, in a room of like guys getting after it, there's always the one. So the training in the beginning, those guys took to it extremely fast. In the first 2 to 3 weeks, I took them outside to do sleds. I had a former teammate of mine who I told you was like a state champ. He owns a restaurant. I traded him my book for some empty kegs. I took the kegs to my neighbor at my gym, filled them with sand and water, welded them. So I made those guys train at least half the day outside with keg carries, sleds, and all that sled stuff was stuff I learned from EFS. And trained them with dumbbells, kettlebells. 2 to 3 weeks later, sumo deadlift, hang clean, front squat, their bodies took to it like so fat, and you watched them get so like strong quickly. Whereas the difference of today is it's taking a very long time to get athletes to move and progress, because even at the Division I level, when I went to Rutgers a couple years after that, I had to show kids how to bodyweight squat all the way down, how to extend the arms all the way on pull-ups. And it was, again, state champs, all-state, national champ, all these high-level sport, super low-level strength and conditioning knowledge. And I'm going to tell you where I learned that, where I got lucky, is I called up Buddy Morris in the early Q&A days when he was Coach X. And he was, for some reason, saying, yeah, if you want, I think he would leave his email.
Yeah.
And I called him one day, and he knew I was going to call him. And I remember saying, hey, Coach X. He's like, call me buddy, calling him Coach X. And he said, Zach, high-level sport does not mean high-level technical strength and conditioning. And so because I was so obsessed, when somebody told me something once, I picked up on it really fast. And so I was learning quickly from, the best of the best how to implement and tweak training for high-level guys. And so Lehigh, what I noticed was there was a different personality type of those kids who had going into this like school that's almost like Ivy League type, but they were amazing kids. I'm still in touch with some of them today. And then going to Rutgers, we had more of like street tough kids. We had kids from Ohio, Iowa. We had a lot of Jersey kids. Jersey is known for like the Jersey attitude. So they required, similar training, but they just had a different attitude. They were like wanted like that tough stuff. And at Rutgers, when I started training there, I was in their old weight room, which of course I loved.
Yeah.
It was an old weight room that was there from I don't even know how many decades prior. This was kind of like the beginning of Rutgers going into the Big Ten. Now they're getting donors, big equipment, da-da-da. I don't want fancy shit. When I was at Rutgers, I said to the director, I was like, do you guys have sandbags, this, that? And the reason why I asked was because I had seen some stuff under the football stadium. Those old sandbags, those red ones? I saw stacks of them collecting dust. I saw stacks of plyo boxes collecting dust. So I said, I saw some stuff. He's like, I'll reach out to the football coach. I went over there and I made it happen. I saw a guy working in the building. I don't know, like what, I think he was like welding something. And I said, dude, if I could get kegs here, can you weld it? He said, absolutely. I was like, I'll get you t-shirts. So I knew that training, I don't want to say I knew, I feel that training, when it's so perfect, doesn't develop the mindset needed to really, when people win, when football teams win, when wrestlers win, my daughter plays tennis, one of her matches was 3 hours, 15 minutes. You're not winning on your skill. You're winning on like the toughness and your ability to maintain skill through conditioning, even though that's such a general word. And so I learned to kind of what I call you're blending science with some hellish training, but not so much that it burns people out or causes injury. I'm actually really in tune with like that prehab rehab to keep them healthy.
Well, if I'm understanding what you're saying, at the Division I level, they needed like 3 or 4 weeks of straight conditioning work, and then you could take them to the strength work. So GPP work.
Yep.
So at the high school level, is it 3 to 4 weeks, or is it way longer that they need?
We're talking like it's like kids are showing up really struggling at the high school level.
Okay.
They struggle to do a pull-up. A pull-up is harder than a push-up. Push-ups look really bad. I probably in my early days never would have said you need bodybuilding work because I didn't need it. I didn't need speed and agility with kids because when they were done lifting, they played pickup basketball. They played tackle football on their own. They were sprinting and jumping and doing all that. Today, kids can't jump rope. They can't do a push-up. So you're really starting at such a low level of physical readiness. And looking at, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you mentioned the Soviets, the elephant in the room. Listen, so I don't care that the Soviets took drugs. Americans took drugs in the Olympics, blah, blah. What I look at is how did the Soviets prepare their athletes in the younger years?
Yeah.
And I plug and play that into how I train athletes. And also, my dad's from Romania. So my dad told me stories before they left Romania to go to Israel. He was 11 or 12. He said every month coaches would come to the school and weigh in the kids in their boxers. They look at your physique and they would say, you're going to be wrestling and water polo. I don't know, just like you're tall, you're going to be volleyball and basketball. You're like medium build, slender, you're going to be a swimmer. So my dad was in swimming and boxing. But he said physical education was like 20-minute circuits. They run the track and go over hurdles. Then there's a section in the middle of the track where you're throwing small shot puts. Then you go to another section and you play handball against kids. Then another section, you're playing soccer. And like this last Friday, I watched our JV team wrestle, and I got to really see the negative effect of lack of multi-sport, lack of off-season preparation, lack of confidence in yourself. And so I look at those lacking segments and plug them in at the private sector. And then at the high school, the tricky thing is it's not mandatory for you to lift with me after school. There's no punishment, right? If you don't show up in the off-season, there's no punishment. It just doesn't happen. Whereas you and I come from an era of you were afraid to let down your coach, or in this case, you would sound like disobeying your coach. My coach said we run on Wednesdays at the park. We will be there no matter what. Today, I'm busy, I'm this, I'm that. So at the private sector, I have the consistency. At the public school, if you lack consistency, it's just this roller coaster effect of get strong, get better, disappear. Now they lose it. And also kids think that they know what they're doing. Gyms cost $10 a month. You know, some gyms are free for kids in the summer. Their parents are like, hey, Dave is training at blah, blah gym on his own. And that's where I say, like, I'm on my own program. They build what I built as a kid, bodybuilding muscle, pump up muscle, no strength. Lack of strength creates a lack of inter and intramuscular coordination. So we're lacking in a lot of areas. I don't know how it is here, but my son started mowing people's lawns a couple of years ago. You don't see kids mowing lawns. There's no manual labor. So they're missing all that. So if you want to be a strength coach for kids, you have to be able to implement that stuff at the middle school level and above. If you're at the youth level, you have to bring back tag games, dodgeball, obstacle courses. You have to gamify stuff and try to replicate what we did on the playgrounds as kids, chasing each other.
Can you make up that deficit though? Because you're talking about, you know, when kids are playing, you know, on their own, you're talking hours and hours and hours.
You're right.
You only have them for how long a week?
That's right. You can't make it up. You can't. Now we're seeing high level of skill in sport. We're also seeing an overabundance of injuries. And I don't know what the longevity is of these athletes, but I'll tell you what I've seen from the eyes. You know, my son's in 8th grade, so playing rec baseball, you're waiting for a baseball game, you see older kids playing. I saw a kid break his elbow pitching. He broke his elbow. Now, what do I think as a strength coach? What do I know? You don't do push-ups. Your elbow is not strong. Why? You're pitching 100 plus times a day. You have no strength. Why don't we have strength? What's more popular, Dave? Speed and agility class or strength and conditioning? What do you think?
Oh, speed and agility, I'm sure.
That's right. So my son and I have no problem saying this stuff. I don't give a shit because I say it to their face. I go, guys, you have a speed and agility class, but what agility does my son need in baseball? What is he dodging? He needs speed, yeah. But why do we have 75% of the pitchers with injured shoulders, elbows? Why do we have kids with injured backs? I'm going to tell you why. You're just weak. I don't want to give any fancy term. The bottom blatant line is you're weak. Why is your trunk weak? Because you can't do push-ups, you don't go on monkey bars, you don't play multiple sports, you don't wrestle with kids. My neighbor has 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. The boys are like elementary school. They're beating the piss out of each other on the front lawn for like 2 hours a day. And I'm like, that is perfect. They don't know it, but they're actually getting really strong. They're building all the buzzwords, core strength. And how did you develop speed and agility when you were young? You played manhunt. You also did some crazy shit. You'd run from the cops. You know, you'd egg a car, you'd run. I always say those things. But today, we're trying to make everything so perfect for these kids that sports are imperfect. Everything that happens on a football field is not going according to plan. Same thing with a basketball game. Many years ago, I had a young kid break his foot jumping rope at my gym. The father couldn't believe it. He's like, I don't understand. What's happening? I said, all right, let's backtrack. How old is he? 11, 12. I think he was 12. What sports does he do? Basketball. Yeah. What other sports? Basketball. When did he start travel? Age 7. Okay. How many months a year? 11. So from age 7 to age 12, all he's doing is sprinting, jumping, cutting. There's no other sport. So if the body is not given an opportunity to rest or change the stimulus, then the body will find a way to rest by just simply, it'll break. It breaks. Now, certainly there's freak accidents that happen, right? You could be the best prepared and shit can happen. But people have created businesses out of stuff that hurts kids, meaning my son plays baseball. The baseball goes year round. And I told them, I don't need my son swinging the same direction 11 months out of the year. That's why we got back problems in baseball. You want to do speed and agility? What are what are you doing to strengthen his whole body? Swinging a bat is full body. What are you guys doing? They're just copying an Instagram video or a YouTube video. And so that's why that old Soviet system of multiple sports, exposure to basic gymnastic and tumbling drills is so crucial, because it builds not just the physicality and the coordination, it also builds, you and I harped on it for the beginning, the mindset. How can I be confident if I'm only training in this perfect scenario all the time? And I'll take it a step further, because that's how my brain operates. We mentioned, so you have heat here, but you don't have air conditioning. Okay, my gym does not have air conditioning. I remember going to a wrestling tournament one summer in a college, and there was no air conditioning. And I was like, man, I cannot friggin' breathe in here. Not that it was like a shock to my system, but today you got to be careful, because everything is temperature controlled. Well, what happens if yesterday was 60 degrees here, today it's snowing? What happens if I go someplace, like when you're in the Big Ten, you might fly across the country. So it might be, somewhat warm. Then you're in Chicago, it's freezing. You're dealing with imperfections. At the high school level, you're playing football. You go out to the football field, people are cursing, making fun of your mom, talking about your sister, blah, blah, blah. But when you work out, I can't deadlift till my song comes on. You want to do stuff that prepares you for the oh shit factor. Yeah. And because training is getting to this everything's so perfect, it's not, maybe it's helping. I think it's hard to say who's it benefiting. I think kids compete when they could see somebody's score on, meters per second. But, I also question, that coach might be great with software, but what if that kid moved the bar so quick and the form was so shitty, but you're just great with software. You don't really realize that his back was in a shitty position, and so it's not good. So kids, in a nutshell, if they're lucky in the right environment and have a lot of free play, they're going to be in a good place. But if they're not exposed to all that stuff, all those movement patterns, man, you're in a real struggle. And strength coaches who've been in it for like 12, 15 years have seen what I call like the de-evolution of these young athletes, where skipping is a problem. Before I left here Wednesday, we did leapfrog in my gym. When the guy crouches down, dude, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was they couldn't coordinate. They felt awkward putting hands on somebody. It just threw them for a loop. And it's like, wow, that's actually a great drill. Somebody's crouched down. I get some hip and knee and ankle mobility. Somebody pushes on me. I'm getting a little pressure. This person's jumping and landing. People are falling all over the place. If you can't do a push-up, how do you get up when you fall in football or lacrosse?
Well, what I'm wondering is if these kids are in sports year-round, club sports or whatever it is, did they do away with what I used to say was a stupid warm-up, which was, you line up, jumping jacks, sit-ups, push-ups, bear crawl, crab walk, side shuffle, karaoke. All this was just part of what you did to warm up. And that was true for me in every sport I ever did. If it was wrestling, it was just changed a little bit because it's on a gym floor.
Yeah.
You know, football's different. And in my brain, if they're participating in a club sport year round and they're doing that year round, then they wouldn't have the shortfalls unless they drop that.
They drop it, or they think it's too elementary. So they won't bear crawl, right? They won't bear crawl. And also, a lot of times the coaches don't know somebody's doing push-ups wrong. They don't understand how to correct it, how to come and talk to a kid. Say, listen, you're going to lift up your back here. Your head's going to pick up 1 inch. Or they don't know how to say, you're struggling on push-ups. So every morning when you wake up, you're going to do 2 push-ups. You're going to come home from school and do 2 at night. Then the next week you're going to do 3s. And they don't know how to say those things. And bear crawls are great because it prepares you. You know how many athletes we see like breaking wrists and arms? Mm-hmm. Why? You don't do bear crawls. You don't do push-ups.
I used to have to do that shit in football with somebody on my back.
That's right. Or you're not on monkey bars where you jump off and like kind of land in like that crouched position. So that old school, people might say, oh, that's like uneducated or blah, blah, blah.
It's better than nothing.
And well, it's actually really good. It's preparing them for impact. It's preparing them physically and emotionally. It builds confidence when you're in positions that are awkward. I remember thinking to myself, talking about ankle mobility, you see all these high-tech ankle mobility drills. Put a band on, do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. We're going to bear crawl, and that's going to start helping your ankle mobility. And we could do it with 50 to 60 people. But when we bear crawl, we're not going to stick our butt in the air. We're going to keep our back flat. We're going to line up our feet and knees. There's a lot of that stuff that's considered play. But if you're smart, if you're intelligent, you understand that that actually boosts sport performance. And so after watching the wrestling team last week, after they lifted, I brought them in and we're doing shoulder rolls, cartwheels. Kids could only do a cartwheel to one side, not the other side. Buddy carries. I used to watch that Dan Gable Competitor Supreme. They would buddy carry up the stadium stairs, hold your ankles, hands up. And then I would see those like Shaolin monks were doing all the like sprinting and jumping up the stairs. I copied that stuff. That builds power and explosiveness. So I think we're in this like the equilibrium is moving towards science when I believe training is an art form. It's this ability to like implement things that impact the athlete's mind, the psychology. It's the physical. And then I'm also going to give them what they want. What do they want? They want to get an arm pump. They want to get a big chest. Last 7 minutes, free time. You want to curl your face off? Go for it. So you're finding bits and pieces to put the puzzle together. My concern is that the business of strength and conditioning, it's not like, or the business of sport blended with strength and conditioning, kids are too busy to do strength and conditioning because they're constantly traveling for these sports that they lack consistency. And the speed and agility type places that don't want to do strength, that kind of demonize it. Strength, there's a different kind of confidence an athlete will build when they hit a PR. But if I'm running through cones, or maybe I run a 40-yard dash or a flying 10 faster, that's a confidence builder, but it's different than the battle against the weight. And by the way, I do both. So for the haters out there, we sprint, we jump, we track their vertical. And I'll track your vert even if you're not a field athlete. Why? I'm just getting you to compete. I have to teach you how to compete. A lot of people don't know how to compete. So we're starting at a deficit. And if you don't understand how these young athletes need to be built up, you're going to be trying to teach, this is why you have football coaches saying, freshmen, welcome to the weight room. Everybody's doing power cleans. So the 9th grader is going to do what upperclassmen are doing who have 3 more years of training experience. So we filmed videos here, and we did a dumbbell video. When the incoming freshmen come to the high school, they don't touch a barbell with me for probably 6 to 8 weeks. They just do dumbbells and body weight and hill sprints. And let me tell you, they get fucking strong. They build what I call a structure. They're doing goblet squats. And I called Jim when I got hired. Like, Jim, how do you manage 60, 80 kids? And he told me about those standards with dumbbells. So I was like, all right, we're going to have standards. You could, and they're like, oh, but I do this at home. I tell them now, I go, if you train with your mother's, father's, brother, sister's, uncle in your basement, I don't care. I need to see it. And now it's like, all right, you want to squat? 75-pound dumbbell squat for 3 sets of 10. It used to be just do it for 10. But then I learned, like, there's no volume. There's no time. You know, I could squat 75 pounds for 10 reps. That kid could do 10. Mine can look slow and grind it out and elbows out. I do 10, but he does 10 clean, elbows in, posture up. He's stronger. Same exercise, same weight, but he's got more speed. He has better technique. Those are all signs to me of greater strength. But if you're not educated, you're just looking at an exercise, period, end of story. I'm looking at how they move. And so when the football guys come in, those incoming freshmen, I teach them farmer walks. I teach them bodyweight squat, lunge, push-up. Their push-ups are usually real bad. So I'll say, okay, if your push-ups are bad and your abs are you're doing 3. If you're killing it, you get 10. And then I teach them a recline row. We've got a lot of kids that cannot do an inverted row, even if you bend their legs. So what do? Tons of band pull-aparts. Now think about this. Way back in the day, Joe was starting to experience DeFranco some shoulder pain. And then he says to me, my shoulders have been feeling real good. I do 100 pull-aparts a day. Note taken. Bang. I just started implementing more pull-aparts, more face pulls. So that's their introduction. They know how to bodyweight squat. Now you're going to do a farmer walk. So it's like working on a farm. You're going to carry something. We're going to do calisthenics. And then sprinting, I have found, makes them strong because they're just going as hard as they can. And I'm not being like, this is the technique of running. And when I speak to high level, like sprint coaches, and they talk to me in this kind of sector, they say, don't overcoach speed with your guys. Okay? Oh, my son throws his head back. They're like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Get them strong. Get them pushing the sleds. Get them moving at a forward angle. Teach them how to lift the knee and punch back. Like real, brilliance with the basics. And so we're also in a place of this strength and conditioning where people are getting so fancy and shit looks fancy and it's actually not working. So we're seeing kids doing a lot of stuff, but they're not getting better. Like I have a kid that started training with us a few weeks ago. He's a baseball player, and I can't remember what other sport. His mom said they go like an hour away for an arm care program. So I said, I'm kind of sometimes just go tell him right. I go, what about the rest of the body? Because when you're throwing, it's not just your arm, okay? It starts from the feet. Then it goes, travels up, legs, hips, trunk. They call it core. So everybody has these like buzzwords. But businesses are being built on fads and gimmicks, right? And I just pay attention to what parents ask me for. I haven't had too many people tell me their son needs to get stronger in a long time, or their daughter. It's been a real long time. Most of them say he needs core strength and speed and agility. And so on my website, I kind of make those notes. And that's why I start thinking, like, is underground strength gym scare people away? But if you call your gym like, whatever, Speed Unlimited, or I'm just coming up, or Speed and Agility Elite, you're going to be packed to the gills. But I'm going to tell you, what has changed more lives is getting strong.
Yeah.
100%.
All right, let's take a bathroom break real quick. So run some ads. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real world experience is what I would consider, and they consider, battle tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the field rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. Today's episode is brought to you by Element, a tasty Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real world experience is what I would consider and they consider battle tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the field rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. We've talked about the conditioning aspect of the D1 to the high school athlete and younger. We talked about your own mindset, coming up, and it's got to be a weird thing first off, right? Because to work on somebody's mindset, do you feel like, first off, are you overstepping your bounds as a coach, especially in today's world?
Right.
But it's a necessary part of getting strong. So I guess to start, let's go with just a change in the young athlete's mindset. So from when you started with those 4 kids in your garage, right, to what you see now.
Oh yeah. It actually, I'm remembering not just now, but probably like 10 years ago, here and there you'd get a kid that was like scared of the world, and you're like, damn, dude, I have to. When I first started training athletes, Dave, everything was for winning. That's it. That's all I thought about. Mm-hmm. Probably trying to I didn't win a lot, so now I want to help everybody else win a lot. And then you get a comment down the road from somebody, a mom, saying oh my God, I had to email you because, all these years we have this pool in the backyard, and when Dave's sister brings over her friends, the girls are out, he's always wearing a shirt. This year is the first year he took off his shirt. And then I start realizing okay, this is deeper than points on the board. It's more than that. And I also learned that if I only focus about winning, I'm missing out on other shit going on in their life. And so what hit me hard once was about like, it happened, I remember during like after Hurricane Sandy, a kid I trained was a real elite athlete. Football broke all the school records. Wrestling broke all the school records. But he lived in a real bad area, but his dad did everything, I always say, except kind of get out of like the hood. And after high school, he was murdered. And I always think to myself, like, all I spoke to him about was wrestling and football and winning. I never was like, how's school? What, what are you thinking of for this? He was also a quiet kid. I mean, he trained like 2 days before the state tournament. He was just very unique. That's not an excuse on my end. It was me only focusing on the physical and the outcome. When I saw the kids getting confident from training. I just thought it was happening. It's always happening. Through the years, I started getting less of those kids that had work ethic and like high talent, and it became a lot more of the mindset. They come in, they don't look you in the eye, they're scared of the world, and I learned like I had to become more inviting. My early days was like, get the fuck out of here. Like, if you can't do this, cursing at people, kicking people out. It was like a kill or be killed. Now, I actually took a lesson that I learned decades ago working with a wrestling coach when I was a bartender. He worked as the guy in the liquor store, and this was like 1999, 2000. He said, Zach, I used to lose a lot of kids the first 2 weeks because I went so hard. I lost a lot of great athletes. He's like, now I go a little easier those first 2 weeks, and those great athletes become great wrestlers. He's like, but I lost a lot of kids who could have become great because I was too hard in the beginning. And so I took a note from him, took a note from Coach Reeve. He used to say, Zach, let kids finish a workout with 10% in the tank. He's like, this is the way they want to come back. They maybe want to do more on their own. That's good for them because he said it builds their mindset. He's like, even if they do machines, he's like, it doesn't matter. It's extra work. It builds their confidence. And so now, being older, I've learned that no matter how hard you work or how correct your training is, if you can't get the athlete to believe in his or her preparation, they're not going to win. And so now I really try to slowly build them up. And I also identify wins. Like, hey, do you remember you couldn't do a push-up? You just banged out 3 push-ups. That's 300% more than 0. And in their mind, that's like, ding, that's a victory. Do you remember you couldn't last through the warm-up? You're killing the warm-up. Another, like, I get a lot of middle school kids. I got this one kid. He's a great kid, but he struggled a lot. We were real busy one day, had a new kid. I said, Brendan, show him how to do squat jumps. He's like, Coach, if you want me to be the coach, I could be the coach. He says to me. Yeah. And so my mistakes in the early years of being a psycho, I was really a psycho. I mean, I would have thought, but I was also getting kids that wanted to win it all. And then I went through this transition period where more people opened up gyms, and now kids are going elsewhere. I wasn't like the only person in the area, and I had to learn how to build them up. And as a dad, you got to learn to do it with your kids too. Mm-hmm. You got to learn to build the mind. So to me, I've learned through my mistakes personally.
But it's different with your kids than it is with somebody else's kids, because there's the other side of when they mess up and they don't do things right, and you have to come down on them.
Yes.
Right? So you have to wiggle your way around that when it's somebody else's, right?
I have this like inner rule where I am going to do the right thing, even if it means getting fired or losing somebody. And if I lie to you and bullshit and kind of tap dance around the fact that you're not consistent or you're not being coachable, or when I tell you to do something, I will lose money, right? Business people who own gyms will say, take the money. Just take the money. I'm not. If he don't want to listen, and his mom and dad, that's their hard-earned money, I'm letting them know that he doesn't want to listen, And if it continues, we're going to pause the membership for a year. Back in the day, you were just dead to me. You would never be allowed back. But I'll tell kids the truth. You know, I've said to kids, and I've been doing it for a long time, I feel like it was like 2010, I started seeing this decline. I remember saying to a kid, you've been here 6 months and you can't fucking do a push-up. You have to always do hand elevated push-ups. Do you need a strength coach to get better at push-ups? No. I go, so whose fault is it that you can't do push-ups? He said, mine. And I know that was harsh for that kid, but I had to tell him the truth, because if I'm not telling him the truth, where can he start progressing? And that kid disappeared for a little bit. I can't remember if they stopped during a sports season. He came back like 2 years later and was a transformed kid. And I'm not saying I transformed him, but he was emotionally and mentally ready for that. I tell athletes all the time, do you need me to do calisthenics? You don't. And so if you're not getting better at it, what I say to them is I go, you don't want it. And then the kids get into it too. I'm like, did you eat breakfast today? No, I was busy. That's all right. You don't want it. And then a kid, I go, oh, go ahead, Dave, tell Jim he don't want it. And then I think if you're too nice, you're full of shit. Sometimes you got to go for the throat. Other times you got to kind of be one-on-one with the kid and say, listen, you're capable of so much more, but you're blowing it. These past 3 months, you're here for a week or two. You're gone for 2 weeks. When I coach you, you get upset. You act like a baby. If you want to be great or even good, you need to turn this corner. So I'm going to give you another chance. I know you could do it, but if you don't want to do it, I'll love you anyway. But we can't have you coming in here with this lack of consistency and you're not wanting me to coach you. You know, so you have the heart-to-heart times, you have the go-for-the-throat times, and then you have the other times where you're very lighthearted. It's like a chameleon.
Yeah, I think there's a balance, because you were talking about,
and it's never perfect.
No,
it's never.
But it can be very offset, you know, in one way and in each way, where you were talking about coaches that, you know, that will say, you know, go for the money and all that, where being in this industry for as long as we have, that can work sometimes, and it can go tall, but it never goes wide. It never goes long.
Yes.
You know, so you better hope that when you go for the money, you make as much money in 3 years than you would if you stayed in business for 20, because you're not going to make 20 if all you ever do is go for the money.
And you'll always need new people coming through. Our kids stay with us till they graduate high school.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that should be taught in business from the very beginning is lifetime value.
Yes.
And acquisition cost, right? Because
relationships here, because it means something to me when I'm buying equipment from somebody who's done what you've done.
Yeah.
It means something. And so, going deeper than the training is crucial. And if you don't give a shit, then I can't teach you how to really love these kids. So when a kid is not succeeding, like, that hurts me too. Especially when you know that it's like, just be consistent and start eating more steak and eggs, you know, but sometimes it's just pieces of the puzzle. Is mom and dad on your side, or do they enable when they're not home? And there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that kind of determine the outcome. And
there's a lot of balance, because, you know, a lot of teams are shitty teams because of one rotten apple. A lot of companies become shitty companies because of one rotten apple.
You know what I like that is like? So I was driving here on what's this highway, 70? Mm-hmm. 70? So in New Jersey, you have like Garden State Parkway, Turnpike. If I'm on the Parkway and there's 3 lanes, I could be in the fast lane. You should be driving fast. There's one person in the fast lane on their phone, not looking in the mirror, but there's 30 to 40 of us backed up. And he don't care. He's on his phone. He doesn't care about anybody. And I've had that at the Division I level. One person consumes you, takes away your ability to give to others, and they don't give a fuck that it's all about them. And I don't even know if they realize it. It's the guy in the car looking at his phone, driving 65 when most people want to go pretty fast, and we're all backed up, but we can't go forward because you won't get out of our way. You're just caring about your phone and you're not looking in the mirror. And so, you know, in a team setting, I address those things. And it's heartbreaking when you have somebody who is like a cancer to the team. They they destroy it. And guess, sometimes the cancer could be a coach. It's not always a athlete or a kid. And in the private sector, your coach has to bring, bring the juice. I look at my kids getting coached, and I'm like, all right, my daughter's coach, he's like touching the phone nonstop, or he's just against the wall, or he's just teaching tennis. He doesn't speak to her about life, anything. And at one of my facilities, I was pretty much hands off with coaching there. I would, we mentor the coaches, manage, but he had taken over from a previous coach, and he said to me, like, man, I just want these kids to be more self-sufficient. I said, we're not being paid to make them self-sufficient. I said, here's what I want you to pretend. And I think being a dad, I know being a dad made me a better coach. I said, I want you to pretend your kid is in the weight room, in the gym. You're outside looking through a glass window. What do you want that coach doing? Do you want the kid looking at the board, figuring it out on their own? Do you want that coach to be on his phone, or do you want that coach to be motivated, exciting to be around, positive? Do you want that coach to talk to your kid about, hey, focus on your academics, or listen, what do you do around the house to help your mom? Your mom's going through a tough time now. Are you at least doing your laundry? And let me tell you something. Jim, yesterday we went out to eat. That's what Jim does for every kid. There was a lot of people, a lot of kids that came up to him, former players. And he's like, what are you doing now? He's like, are you still training? Make sure you're still training. You got to be strong. Another kid used to play football. No more football. He's like, listen, you already know that race is 5K. Now you got to get stronger. Pick it. What do you like better? Squats or, He's telling, he gives a shit about their success even when they're not in football, even when they're not in the sport anymore. And so it's like, if you don't care from the heart, it's fatal. My early years, I cared, but I only cared about winning because I didn't understand life stuff. I started coaching. I'm in my mid to late 20s. I'm not a dad. I'm not understanding what kids are going through. And now I know what kids are going through. Now,
how would you explain that to a younger coach? Like, how would you explain that to yourself?
Yes.
When you're 25.
Do the make pretend that that's your own child.
Yeah.
What would you want your own child?
But they don't have a child.
You have to pretend.
Yeah.
Is it only going to be training? I think a good coach is going to say, yeah, I don't want my coach to only tell my kid how many sets and reps or how low to squat. I want them to be like a light, a shining ray of light. It sounds so corny, but how can you and I have said since the start, strength has changed our lives. I believe the minimum effective dose of a coach is you have to change somebody's life. Do I change everybody's life? Absolutely not. Do I fail on it or stumble or falter or whatever word? Absolutely. Is it always my fault? No. Sometimes the kid doesn't give me an opportunity to see them enough because mom and dad doesn't bring them enough.
Yeah.
Or it's the timing of the thing. So I do go back to that. I say, make pretend you're watching your son or daughter now or in the future, right? You're a young coach. What do you want them to give? And so, and I still learn, like working at the school, I've been like pretty tough on this one kid. And sometimes you could be like too hard. So I sent him an email. I said, hey man, I missed you the past week, just checking in. And he's like, yes, blah, 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 has been going on. I was like, all right, man, if you want to grab lunch with me, let me know. We could grab lunch. He's like, Even-Esh, you'd be the first guy I want to grab lunch with. And part of me was like, man, good thing I reach out because you could wait too long on shit. Going back to like, oh, I didn't know I could quit. Now we see like suicide rates rising because kids will quit. And so you don't know how hard you could push somebody. So I used to never joke around. And not that I'm a funny guy, but I make these kids laugh. We say a lot of we'll say like dumb stuff. I remember we had a kid that was, we made this laugh. He stopped training. It was baseball, hockey. I was like, man, where you been? We miss you. He's like, oh, I've been going to this gym. So then, like, everything he did that day, it was wrong. Like, it's like he forgot to squat. He did push-ups. We're like, man, did you learn that in this gym? And we're like running on him, and the kids still remember it. So anytime somebody's like goes to another gym, the kids are like, oh, he must be at an anonymous gym where he's doing it wrong. Or if somebody laughs at a joke and it was like something wrong, I'm like, hey, that's not funny. And they're like, oh, no, that's not funny. But we find stupid ways to joke. So you have to trick kids today into making it fun. They don't show up like, I'm going to grind. I'm going to rebuild myself. That's the shit that goes through my mind. And I openly admit, like, I got certainly some shit going on upstairs, and I believe in that rebuild. But kids don't understand that. They come into a weight room, they're one step shy of shitting their pants most of the time. So you have to make it welcoming. You have to let them know, hey, you need to take a break. Go take a break. Get fresh air. Don't worry about what that guy's doing. Don't worry about what your buddy's doing. Just do this. Just do 5 reps. So it's like this, think a plane taking off. It's like nice and easy. So every time they come back, they're getting more like points on the scoreboard of life. So you're building them internally, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And you have to mention that stuff to them because kids feed on that. Anybody who grew up in the 80s did not have that. Your coaches F-bombed you. They called you all kinds of names. They slapped you in the back of the head, you know, while smoking a cigarette, right? Your coach was not, they did whatever they wanted to. And it was just rough and tough. And when they said get tough, that's it. There was no context or here's how you got to get tough. I want you to do this. Well, I pay attention to those things. If you're struggling or the coach says he always gasses out at the end of the wrestling match or, you know, by the time, you know, fourth quarter comes around, he's slow. I keep that in mind. I'm like, hey, get an extra set of sleds today. I want you to pretend it's third period wrestling, you know, whatever, fourth quarter. So when you're out there on the field or the wrestling mat, you remember this. So it's like a house. You're like building these bricks of the kid that you're training. And if you do it right, they will continue. Like they'll take those lessons and they now apply it to life. So yes, I'm a strength coach. I'm a sports performance coach, whatever you want to call it. But really, this is all just a vehicle for being better at life. My son has become like something, he's just better since he's been training a lot.
Well, training is a gift.
Yes.
Right? So, I mean, it shaped your life. It shaped my life. It shaped a lot of people's life. And we don't know, and the coach doesn't know what's really going on in that kid's life.
Yes.
You have no idea. Nothing. His father could be fighting cancer. You know, his brother could have just committed suicide. You have no idea.
Correct.
What's going on. But the time that they're in training, you know, even for us now, when you come in and you're training, it's a break. It's like, okay, life's outside.
It is.
I get a break right now. I don't have to deal with that. And it's a gift, right? And maybe for other people that is video games or, you know, whatever it is, but they have whatever to be able to
working on cars, woodwork.
Yeah, give a break.
Yes.
You know, so that is why Jim, you know, when he sees those people, those kids, it's like, hey, are you still training? Are you still training? Because that's a gift, right?
I believe it should never end. That's what I always tell the kids. When you're done with sports, you don't just stop. The hill sprints continue. The deadlifts go on. You know, I'm 47 and I'm still deadlifting, so not the same weights, but I can still do it and I feel great. And I got to tell you, you know, speaking of kids, I've trained some adults who are come to me in their 40s who are still the scared 15-year-old. They're just 30 years older and they never had the coach, the mentor to transform them. And I remember a couple of years back, I ran into a guy shopping at the mall. And he's like, I wanted to tell you, he went into the police academy the last year for corrections. So I think you could be older. I think he was like 42. He's like, everything you taught me. He's like, without you, it changed my life. He was like a single dad. His son was like 12 or 13, but he was delivering pizza. He had like some other job. He didn't have a quote unquote real job. He's like, training with you completely transformed me. He's like, you got me to believe in myself. So the age is actually irrelevant. if somebody goes through life without mentors, without a coach, teaching them and giving them the permission to be strong and showing them that strength is built, then they won't achieve it. They'll be 45, 55, 65, lacking confidence, which is why, and look, I speak, my buddy Jesse Ackerman, he's coach at the Division I level, the NFL. He, will say strength matters. When he was with the Falcons and they had more training time, they were in the they were in the Super Bowl. Being strong builds that confidence. And so that for me is the step one, is like do strength stuff that builds muscle, right? And then I always like let them know when they've succeeded. And I think I look back to being a wrestler getting pinned my freshman year in front of everybody over and over and over again. I wish somebody would have said, Zach, you come with me to the gym. We're going to deadlift heavy, teach you sprinting, lift heavy. And then every time you're building, he's like, yeah, you're a bad motherfucker. You could do this. When you're young, you need somebody giving you the green light to be a badass. Some people are born with it. I do not believe the saying that you're born with it, you're yes or no, because in Dagestan, living on the mountains where everybody's wrestling and I got to go up and down the hill, I'm tough because that's my environment. I live in a real nice town, Dave, and most of those kids, I say, you're not tough. Because who's punching you in the face? Who's starting a fight with you? I always tell them, last time somebody got in the punch in the face is like 1985 and it was an accident. Like I joke with those kids. But if you grow up in a place that forces you to do stuff, to get strong, your environment shapes you. And my wife reminds me, she's like, we left Edison so our kids don't have to grow up fighting for everything, fighting their way out of things, having to deal with bullies, this and that. And she's right. That I still have that edge in me where I think somebody's going to steal my bike or take my shit. And now it's not protect me. It's be strong so I can protect my family, so I don't look like an easy target. You and I were talking about the neck attachment to the squat rack. When you train your neck, you just look different when your neck is bigger. And so now it's like I'm in the training for life phase. So once the training for sport phase ends, we transition those athletes to training for life. Some people could be motivated all their life with six-pack abs. That doesn't motivate me. When I competed in bodybuilding, I remember after the competition was over, I was like empty. Because I loved training for something and I loved beating people. When people were like, hey, I trained with this guy, Andy, and Andy became a pro bodybuilder, but people would want to train with us. Would be like, yeah, you fucking think you could train with us? Bring it. And then I was natural and I was like, I have to beat Andy and I have to outwork him. Everything to me was like, now I'm going to beat everybody. Once I had that confidence, it was like, I'm going to beat everybody. And I was lucky. Environment, being in the right environment. So that's why I try to have in my gym is an environment that builds you. And in my younger years of coaching, I didn't realize I was building them that way.
I think adversity shapes everybody, right? Where our kids didn't grow up in the same environment that we grew up in. If we did our job, we gave them a better environment to grow up in. That doesn't mean they don't have adversity. It's different adversity. If we shelter them from that adversity, then we are the weak ones, not them.
Correct.
Right? So we got to let that adversity shape them.
Yes.
And so what's the statement of, hard times make hard men make soft times, or whatever it is.
Good, yeah.
I believe that's true to an extent.
Yes.
But if the hard men that are creating the soft times understand that the adversity is just different and to let it happen, which is hard, man, when it's your kid and you see this coming.
It hurts more.
And you got to step back and let it happen.
It hurts the parents more. You know?
Yes, you're weak if you don't let it happen, though.
Right. And you want to know what? That's how a lot of...
Now, I'm not saying they need to get their ass kicked and shit like
No
that.
doubt.
I'm just saying whatever they have to deal with.
That was a big part of how parents were bringing a lot of wrestlers to me in the early years. The dads were so emotionally busted watching their son get beat up that they were fully committed to the training. The dad would drive. It's like, I cannot watch my son get his ass kicked anymore. And then I remember one guy saying, every time my son loses, the kid's got an underground strength gym shirt on. He's like, I got sick of seeing him lose to kids with that t-shirt on. But what I learned was it wasn't just about the kid. Parents, you know, we love our kids. It hurts us when they lose. And so that's what's created this whole business, is parents want to help their kids succeed. But in doing so, it's too perfect, right? Like, you want to get good at baseball back in the day, you just went out and played 8 hours of baseball. You played kill the man with the ball. That was your speed. Mm-hmm. You did that stuff. Now we've organized it. And I think the convenience of things for all of us makes us, like, it softens us all up, because I could just touch my phone and get things.
Yeah.
So we have to I remember Jim long ago saying, he's like, we're so lazy as a society. Weightlifting is just a fabricated manual labor. He's like, because we don't have, now I know we're not doing it for manual labor, but that's essentially, people decades ago didn't have to like strength train because you were busy. You were like physical, you know, even you mentioned like the difference. You know, I can't believe I did some of this shit. When they were training with me out of my parents' house, we were swinging an axe, not a sledgehammer, an axe. Think about that. How crazy am I? We're swinging an axe. Today, there's no way. In fact, remember I used to like flip tires, do all that? We have one tire in the gym. It's like 350 pounds. I had tires that were like 650 pounds. I had 130-pound kids doing it. The big tire in my gym, the 550, it's for free on Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah, well, that's also, you know, you had to figure shit out. You had to use what you had. That doesn't mean that there weren't better tools.
Now it's like I'm like afraid to use it. It's like you overthink stuff. And kids are also afraid. It was real interesting to see how like tough and gritty our kids were with this kind of like imperfect training. And we definitely lost a step when I transitioned out of my house to the warehouse, because now we're not at the playground sprinting the hill. I had nowhere to push the truck. People were waiting. Like, I was in a parking lot that cars drove through, so I can't have a lot of guys doing sleds. When I'd be at the park, you had sleds all over the field, a prowler, multiple sleds. So there's people there. There's somebody on the hill. There's somebody pushing the truck. There's somebody on the monkey bars. Now they were waiting online, and I could just feel this like little loss in our step that we were getting, as you know, Mickey said to Rocky, like, the worst thing that happened to a fighter is you get civilized. I was like, shit.
You know, the other thing that got lost, now that I'm thinking about it too, is there's people walking by saying, what the fuck is that? So the referrals, you know, basically just the free marketing you didn't even know you were doing. We
had, in the beginning, I had no sign on the gym. So people from the gym next door thought we were affiliated. They would like walk in, and I'd have to be like, no, like we're not affiliated with them. And today, I think people are so buried in their phones that you want to have more like foot traffic and eyeball traffic for my type of business. You know, one of our locations was on a highway in a very affluent area, and we were pumping in that place. Compared to where I am now, we're in a place where, like, I think you got to find a place where people value strength and are willing to gain an understanding of the big picture in sports performance. So it's interesting to see people like saying like, oh, you're strong enough. You know, once in a blue moon, I have somebody, that's a crazy, you hear it all the time.
Yeah.
Once in a blue moon, like, for example, I had a couple of freshmen trap bar deadlift over 500 pounds. So I had to say, if you deadlift 600 pounds, are you going to be better at lacrosse and football?
Probably not.
Probably not. We have other things to work on. Or there was a kid at Lehigh that was benching 405 in season for 3 reps. that was kind of scary for me because I'm like, fuck, don't blow a pec. Like you're if you bench more than 405, it's probably not going to go from All-American to national champ. It's finding what makes the athlete tick. So at Rutgers, we had a kid that really loved weighted calisthenics. He liked them. It also allowed him to be better than everybody else because he was stronger. He didn't like when somebody in his group could box squat more than him. So you know what I told him? He was a believer in speed. Why? Sometimes he'd text me, Coach, can we work on my fast twitch muscles tomorrow? Yeah, we will. So when we would do our warm-up, I made sure I added more jump training, more broad jumps, more frog jumps, more clapping push-ups. Then when we would squat, I'd say, listen, after your second set, don't add weight. Do it for speed. Boom, confidence booster. Coach, can I do extra? What do you want to do extra? Weighted pull-ups. Go get me a 100-pound dumbbell. Okay. Kid weighed 125 pounds doing pull-ups with 100. Why? Because it built his confidence and he demonstrated his prowess over the others. So you have to find what makes people tick, find what is their chink in the armor, and build that. Because the building of the weak area in the weight room is what really unlocks the athletic potential. A lot of people just want to do what they're strong. If I want it to really transfer to sports, I need to attack something that I stink at physically, emotionally. It could be a sport technique, So it's interesting how, as a coach, you have to get between the ears to figure people out.
Was there any things that you want to discuss that I didn't bring up? I didn't even have to look at this. I haven't even looked at this list yet.
We didn't, Diamond Gym was a important.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Yes. So I had heard about it when I would go to bodybuilding shows through high school. You'd see the guys from Diamond Gym were winning everything. One of the magazines did an article on them. I don't know if it was, I think it was Flex. And it was called Kemper's Kids. John Kemper was the owner. John Kemper was a bodybuilder in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And it was not close. It was about a 30-minute drive. So when I don't have a license, it's wherever mom and dad could take me to these local gyms 5 minutes away. When I got my license, I'm middle of high school, then I'm done with wrestling. And I'm find out about Diamond Gym because one of the guys that I used to train with left to go to Diamond Gym. I was like, oh, this might be the end of the intensity here. So my dad had his company not far from there because it was in a low income area where the warehouse, the taxes and everything were down. So I had to get directions on paper. You would call the local police department. He calls the police department, says, my son wants to go to Diamond Gym. Can you give me directions from the Parkway? He gives me the directions, and I knew Diamond Gym opened at 5 a.m. So I'm I'm going to be first. I'm going to go there first. And it was December of 1993, maybe November. And so I'm a freshman in college. I get I can't fall asleep the night before. I'm so fucking hyped up to go to this gym. I'm going to be there first. I set my alarm for 3:15 a.m. I'm going to leave at 4:15 to get there early. I can't find the place because they don't have a sign. It was an old bank, and I don't know where the hell I'm going. So I would go all the way up the Parkway. I can't find it. I'd have to reverse the entire direction. I couldn't navigate. And the neighboring town is one of the murder capitals. It's Irvington. It's fucking bad. And I'm can't go through here. I go all the way back to the Parkway, reverse it around. I'm going back and forth, back and forth. I get there a little after 5 a.m. I see some big guys walking in and out. Big guys that you could just see. I find a parking spot and I'm all right, I'm going to be one of the first guys here. And I park in the back, and I'm walking down the hill, and I hear the music going through the wall. I was oh, sounds like people got it going already. And I'm thinking people are in there warming up. I go and I open the door, and it's the heat hits me. The music is fucking blasting, and everywhere you look is people working. Now, this is a converted bank. So you walk in, it's the lobby. You walk to your right, it's like more office. You walk to your left, another office, the vault. It was an old bank. I remember seeing a guy, cut off flannels, jeans, work boots, like the Barbarian Brothers. Everybody covered in sweat. Nobody looked like they just got there. People were covered in sweat. Like they had been there at least 30, 35, 40 minutes. And I was like, holy shit. And the other thing too is like, it didn't bother me that I'm going to a gym where there's barely any white people. It didn't bother me. To me, I had learned that a real gym don't care about the color of your skin. As you and I were saying, we wanted to like earn our respect by working. So I knew that that's what these serious gyms were about. So I take like a little walk through. Nobody acknowledges me. And it was like the beginning of me understanding, like, if I want to be acknowledged here, I'm starting over. I need to show the work. And so I trained, and a week later I turned 18. And so for my birthday, I got a 3-month membership to Diamond Gym. And then that summer I did the bodybuilding show in Israel. And then I went back to dynamic fitness, and I ran into my old buddy, Andy. And Andy sees me. He's like, dude, I'm impressed. I was like, yeah, I think I want to do a bodybuilding show next year. And I mentioned the bodybuilding show. He's like, no, do the Mr. New Jersey with me. He's like, I'm going to do the Mr. New Jersey, and I'm going to then get ready for nationals. I was like, all right, give me till tonight. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to ask my mom if she could cook 6 meals a day. So I go home, and I tell her, I'm going to do this bodybuilding show in April. That's when the Jersey was. And so we're like 6 months out. It's the fall. It's like October, around Halloween. I say, if you think you're going to get tired of making meals, or you're going to be a month into making all these meals and you can't do it, I can't do this. If you say no, I'm okay with you saying no. But if you say yes, I need you to cook for me all the way through. My mom says, I'll cook all these meals. And we never went out to eat, by the way. So my mom was used to making chicken and rice and the 8 egg whites and oatmeal for breakfast. I call Andy. I say, Andy, I'm in. I could do it. He's like, let's fucking go. And Andy, typical like guy prepping for pro bodybuilding, no job, no car, no nothing. So I have to quit my job. I was working at GNC. I'm going to college. And my parents were giving me gas money. I'd pick up Andy, and we trained at this gym, and I took pride, like you said. I took so much pride in being there. And my legs were pretty strong. My upper body wasn't that strong. And there was a couple pro bodybuilders in this gym, very small gym. Everywhere you looked, guys were massive. The unspoken law of the place was work. And the music was very loud to the point that it was hard to have a conversation with people. And I had read years later, didn't even know it, John Kemper said he made it loud to distract people from having conversations. And there was no radio. Back then, people played the radio. Every 5 songs is a commercial. You're about to squat. Fucking commercial comes on for like a TV, or you're about to squat and, some like love song comes on. This place was always pumping with music. And it was interesting. A lot of those guys were like bouncers in New York City, or they were like, the music was like New York City club music. And there was also like guys that were DJs in strip clubs. So it was like all this like crazy house music, but loud. And in my first or second week there, we did a leg workout. And I remember the back room, I think, was like the vault. It was the old vault. And one of the pro bodybuilders in there, he's not alive anymore, Derek Whitsitt must have been looking at me. And so at the end of the workout, we're at the front desk, and somebody's talking, and he interrupts everybody. He goes, my man's got a good squat. That's what he says. And right there, I was like, now I'm going to work even harder, because the top pro bodybuilder in this gym I saw me putting in the work. And as you recall, Dave, in those years, what was a good leg workout? If you could walk up the stairs, you did not work. This place was just the right size where everybody was working. And the way that they trained was very much like power bodybuilding, because John, the owner, started bodybuilding in the 60s. He brought that to Diamond Gym. everywhere around was like, it reminded me of Lehigh. So you got all those old wrestlers. This was bodybuilders. And the only bodybuilders on that wall were like guys who trained there. Some of them, I think you would remember the name Nick Lavatola, who was a teen bodybuilder and powerlifter.
No, great powerlifter.
Yep. So he trained there as a teenager. There's like a photo of him doing a double bicep shot. And I remember the guy that did my nutrition. He's all, and look, you and I, we go through these extremes. That guy who did my nutrition, he's no longer alive. It was an extreme place. And I remember him saying, look at Nicky up there. He's looking to the gods. He's looking to the iron gods, he told me. And I trained at Diamond Gym. Basically, I trained there for 3 months, my freshman year of college. Then I joined the fall of 1994, competed in the spring of 95, and I stayed there until graduate school. And that was like 2001 or 02. And I would train there alone. I had training. I remember actually essentially like breaking off from my training partners because I'd be waiting outside for them. I told them, like, if you can't be on time, if you can't do this with me, I'm going to go alone. It was like breaking up with your first love. It was a heartbreaker. And I learned as I got on my own how to train. Being, natural was hard training with the guys that weren't. And I remember about like a few months into the bodybuilding show, I like said to one of the guys, I was like, man, I think this shit's burning me out. He's like, what do you fucking want from me? He's like, I'm training to be a pro bodybuilder. He's like, you're going to fucking train with me or you're not. Yeah. He's like, I don't care that you chose to do natural. I'm choosing what I'm choosing to do. And about like 2 months out from the bodybuilding show, I really clicked. Like I became like so close to the competition that I was like, I remember John Kemper, I told him that at the desk. I was like, I don't feel tired anymore. I'm like, I want to win so bad. He's like, that's a good attitude. And so him just giving me that little compliment was important. Bigger guys, bodybuilders who are 250, 275 ripped, saying, yeah, that's a good squat. Like that made me go further. When I started training on my own, I came across Dorian Yates's training book. He did a 4-way split. He trained every other day, but he took 2 days off after legs. I started training like that on my own. Nobody to give me forced reps unless I had a spotter. And one day I'm talking with John and Jason Arntz. Jason Arntz was a pro bodybuilder. And I said, guys, like I'm stuck at like 200 pounds, 198. I just can't like get bigger. And they're like, well, what fats are you eating? I'm like, fats? I'm like, I don't have a 6-pack. They're like, that's why. So they said, what do you eat when you're like, leave? So I'm like, well, I leave the gym and then I go home. I have a protein shake. He's like, what do you have for breakfast? I'm having 8 egg whites. He's like, no more. He's like, you're going to have 8 eggs, 4 yolk, 4 whites. He's like, when you're done training, you're going to have your protein shake here. You're not going to wait till you go home 30 minutes away. He's like, when you get home, I want you to have 2 spoons of peanut butter and I want you to eat a steak. I was eating chicken and rice and egg whites. He's like, you're going to eat a steak. So John and Jason start kind of teaching me how to eat with this like higher fat, higher protein, like power bodybuilders, right? Then they go, like, how many salads do you eat? I'm like, nothing. He's like, where's your sodium? This is all the shit that's like groundbreaking today, right?
Oh, yeah.
They're telling this to me in the 90s. They're like, where's your sodium? I'm like, salt, no good. They're like, you're going to start salting your food. And so I went from like 198 to 200 to like 208 within 2 weeks. And the pump and the strength finally took off. I finally started benching 315. The pump was crazy. And I trained every other day, 2 days off after legs. So I started like learning my own kind of method of resting a little bit more, not doing all the forced reps and the drop sets. And I remember Andy threw up doing a shoulder workout. So I'd be like, don't sit down, get the fuck. Like it was just so crazy. And when I had to leave Diamond Gym, so it must have been, I'm in grad school, 01, 02. I'm driving there and I hit traffic. up in that central North Jersey area, everybody working, and I'm in so much traffic, I'm not going to get there. I'm thinking about the graduate project, the research I have to do. I like navigate, I get off the exit, then I have to turn around. I'm in more traffic. I didn't even train that day, but it was like a 4-hour ordeal. I'm stressed out of my mind. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm not going to be able to go back because I'm working full time. I am in graduate school. I'm coaching middle school wrestling. And that's when I started putting equipment in my dad's garage. But the atmosphere about Diamond Gym taught me everything. That music, the work ethic, the camaraderie. When I would be done training, I'd sit out front. Guys would be eating. They'd share training methods. They'd tell you how to eat. Everything was like sharing, talking about the training. I wanted to bring that element to a strength and conditioning facility. And that's where that old equipment really inspired me, because Diamond Gym had stuff that like was welded together. There was a T-bar row kind of like drilled into the wall, and there was like wooden blocks underneath it. They had like a pull-up tower that was just, you could see that it was welded together. And being there always made me want to work. I remember picking up my 2 training partners as we were preparing for the bodybuilding show, and there was like a dead energy in the car. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, like this workout might be bad. Like nobody's talking. There's nothing going on. I remember I had a special stereo in my car to blast the music. I had a Kenwood. Okay. I had a playlist that I made on a cassette tape. Nothing. Crickets. I was like, oh my God, I think today might not be a good workout. You know, Rick ain't talking. Andy looks like he's asleep. Park. We open the door, and then that heat, like right when you walk in, there was like a seated chest press machine, but somebody had like a bar inside of it. It was like, boom, you saw his like arms. You walked in and you're immediately hit with work and people that were jacked. And when we walked in, everybody forgot that they were tired. Nothing was said. I didn't want to ask, should we go light today? Are we having I didn't want to ask. I was just hoping to the iron gods that it would be like it would work. And so that place, to me, it taught me just like the work ethic, the strength. I mean, there was a guy, a Mr. New Jersey in there. I remember they interviewed him. They're like, describe your training. He's like, I lift heavy, barbells, free weights. And then I remember the end, he's like, so basically like it's heavy or not at all. And that's when I actually started getting strong, training at Diamond Gym, seeing guys bodybuilders doing rack pulls with 6 plates, okay? People squatting 5 plates. I saw a woman bench press 3 plates. You'd constantly see bodybuilders incline benching 3, 4 plates. Dumbbells, I have a photo of it. I think they go up to 200 or 180. They're on like the ground. I used to see a guy dumbbell benching them, and there were no rules. Whereas the gyms I went to before, don't wear work boots, no chalk, don't do this, don't do that. And then when I read that article later, John said he allows the guys to park their motorcycles out front, so it's like the Wild West where the cowboys park their horses. He's like, I don't have any rules because training is an art form, and if I try to tell them how to do it, it ruins their art form. And that really shaped how I built what I built, that place, spending 9 years there. And so it's, of course, now there's more hardcore places, and supposedly when I got there was at the end of hardcore. They said the 80s with like Nick Lavatola and guys that everybody was just savages, like, you know, people. That gym was this little gym. And that could happen in a college, right? You could have this little program that starts dominating if the culture and the environment. Dagestan, I think, has like the most like Olympic place winners in wrestling, yet they have like the least population of people.
That gym, that environment, that story is exactly the reason why I founded Elite FTS when I did, because those gyms, those stories, those type of people is what I grow up with since 12 until all the way to now until West Side. And when I look back on that, yeah, I paid gym dues, but I paid nothing else. It was all passed on.
Yes.
So that's where the live, learn, pass on was founded on, and that's where it came from, because that culture, those values, that drive, that experience that you're talking about is something that I feel needs to be passed on, because I owe it to those people that gave it to me.
Agreed.
And so that's why I do basically everything that I do, so that trickles down, and continues. And in the 25 years I've been in business, probably one of the most disheartening things that I've seen is that fracture, because everybody has to fucking monetize. So now those kids can't go into a gym and have an experience like that unless they're fucking paying somebody.
Which is interesting, because if somebody says, if a dad was ever like, hey, I can't afford this, I say, well, then it's free.
Mm.
But what's happened is, like, when it's free, they're not like, it's interesting with that lack of skin in the game. And it happened during COVID. People reached out and said, hey, I lost my job. Some people said, hey, I got a pay decrease. I don't think I could train. And then I'm so tempted to say, yeah, I also got a pay decrease. I was shut down.
No.
But I just said, then it's free. And that's also why I think having the online business, I don't do it because I'm like, oh, I want to impact more people. It allows me to make money in another way.
Yeah.
If I could help somebody. And like, I think it's because we just know that the training, it could save somebody's life. And it's like,
I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, one thing that I've learned, especially in the last few years, is complimentary content is seen as no value.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. I've learned that, but not to everybody.
Correct.
Right. So to the 5-10% of the people that see value in it, they're the reason why I'm still in business. The other 95% that don't see value in it is the reason why I'm not 1,000 times bigger than what I am.
Yeah.
So it's a balance, and it changes.
It's heartbreaking to hear it, because we said this earlier, like, do people read articles? Only the diehards, right? I need to see a video. I need to swipe through. I love reading because I could get lost in it. I could kind of like imagine what's going on. I don't know. I just take it deeper. But then I'm like, am I the only one that's like,
I don't know, because I still think it's a small percentage, and it was a small percentage back then. So it's just the perception, as you get older. We've been going for like 4 hours. How can somebody get a hold of you? Like, what's the best way to follow you?
Zach Even-Esh on social, Strong Life Podcast, and I have a newsletter I write almost daily, ZachStrength.com.
Okay, and you just finished a book that you're going to be coming out with.
Yeah, I'm going to self-publish it, and it's kind of this. It's stories of how the training changed somebody's body and life and mind, and it's all these unique stories that they happened, and then I fabricated them and wrote them in a way that it's always a great lesson.
Yeah.
Because in life, it's not always,
Yeah.
you don't always win. So I think it's going to be a book that's for teenagers. I know they don't read a whole lot, but also young men and even anybody who wants to just get fired up about a great training story, because each story is like, yeah, it's exciting.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. It's been great, Dave. Like 20 years, I think we've known each other. And this is like a great trip for me, a little bit selfish, but been missing you. So great to see you and be here.
No, it's been great.
Yes.
Thank you guys for listening, and we are done.